12-year-old Hamza was known for his quiet eyes and restless heart. He was the kind of boy who dreamed big but carried the weight of unspoken fears. On this particular morning, he stood at the edge of the schoolyard, clutching his worn-out bag, when a cruel laughter cut through the air. The other children circled him like vultures, calling him a liar, mocking his words about his father's job. Hamza's lips trembled. Should he defend the truth and risk humiliation, or stay silent and let his father's honor be trampled? If his father really arrived, what would everyone see? A hero? Or a fraud? And what secret was Hamza hiding that could change everything? The sunlight streamed through the dusty classroom windows, golden rays scattering across cracked wooden desks and faded charts of alphabets. The air smelled faintly of chalk and ink, mixed with the warmth of freshly brewed tea drifting in from the canteen. Children buzzed with energy, their laughter echoing in sharp bursts as they shoved books into bags, waiting for the bell. But Hamza sat alone in the last row, head bowed, his fingers tracing the chipped edge of his desk. He wasn't just quiet, he was invisible. Or so he wished. Because every time his father's name came up, invisibility slipped away, and all eyes pierced into him like knives. Era Suno. Hamza ko Walid Sahab ko Deka Hai, one boy jeered loudly from the front row. It was Danish, the class clown, known for his sharp tongue. Wo Kata Hai Kowaski Abuek, Pilot Hain. Pilot. Ha ha ha. His laugh rolled like thunder, joined by a few others. Hamza's face burned. He had never said it with pride, only whispered it when asked. But somehow the rumor spread twisted, exaggerated, mocked. Agar Waki Pilot Hain To Kyun Cycle PE School Ada Hai? Kar Kyun Nahin Bejta, another voice chimed in, this time from Sima, a girl who often followed Danish's lead. The room filled with snickers. Hamza gripped his pencil so hard it snapped in half. Yes, Caro, whispered Aisha, his only friend, sitting 2 seats away. Her eyes, kind and worried, flickered toward him. But her voice was too soft, lost in the storm of laughter. Hamza wanted to vanish. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of fire rose. He slammed his desk and stood, his voice trembling yet fierce. Mir Abu Pilot Hain. Aapi Sabhanslo, Lekanik Din Tumhain Kudyukin Hojga. Silence fell. Dozens of eyes widened. The bell rang at that very moment, breaking the tension. Children spilled into the corridors, still whispering, still laughing, leaving Hamza with his heart pounding in his chest. The world beyond school. Hamza walked home slowly, his shoes scuffing against the dusty road. His neighborhood was nothing like the dreams he painted for others. Small brick houses, peeling paint, narrow alleys buzzing with rickshaws and vegetable carts. The smell of fried pakoras lingered in the air as shopkeepers shouted prices. At home, his mother, Shazia, was folding laundry in their tiny 2-room house. Her tired smile lit up when she saw him. Hamza, Beta, Kaisa Din Guzra? He forced a smile. Thiktha, Ami. But Shazia's eyes, sharp and motherly, searched his face. She knew something was wrong. Before she could ask, the sound of a door creaking came from the next room. There stood his father, Khalid. Tall, with broad shoulders, but eyes that carried hidden storms. He wasn't in a pilot's uniform, he wore a simple, oil-stained shellwork kameez. His hands were rough, his nails blackened with grease. Abu, Hamza whispered. The word caught in his throat. Khalid smiled faintly and ruffled his hair. Kia hail hi, champ? Hamza wanted to hug him tight, but the cruel laughter of his classmates echoed in his ears. A lie. They all thought it was a lie. But was it? Because the truth was darker than any of them knew. The secret truth. Late at night, Hamza lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. His father's voice drifted in from outside, talking in hushed tones with his mother. Khalid, Kitna Din or Chupange? Bachi Kob Samaj A Rahi Hai. I know, Shazia. Lekan Abi Wakt Sahi Nahin Hai. Agar an Lagan and Ipata Chal Gayato, Sabtaba Hojaega. Hamza's heart raced. What secret were they hiding? Why couldn't they tell him the truth about his father's job? The next morning. The sun blazed mercilessly as children gathered in the assembly ground. The principal's voice echoed from the microphone. Students! Tomorrow, we will celebrate Parents' Day. Harbacha apni walid ya walida ko la sakta hai. Humchad hain ko aap sab apni mabap par fakr karyan. The crowd erupted with excitement. But for Hamza, it was as if the earth had slipped beneath his feet. Parents' Day. The day when all secrets would be exposed. Danish smirked at him from across the rows, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. Ari, abto sab ko sach patachal jaega. Hamza kuabu, kansa plain udenj? Ya cycle shalayinj? The laughter that followed felt like daggers. Hamza clenched his fists. His heart screamed with both fear and hope. Tomorrow, everything would change. But how? Would his father show up as the hero Hamza always believed? Or would the truth destroy whatever respect he had left? A storm building. That evening, Hamza sat quietly by the window. His father entered, carrying a small box. Hamza, Beta, Kal Kuliya Tayarena. Main school Aa Rahahun. Hamza's eyes widened. Sach, Abu? AAP Anj? Khalid's gaze was firm, yet heavy. Han, Main Aoanga. Or Kal Sab Ko Sab Kuch Pada Chal Jaega. Hamza's chest filled with both pride and dread. He wanted to ask, what exactly would everyone know? But Khalid walked away before he could. The next morning loomed like a storm cloud, ready to shatter or save everything. The school ground was alive with chatter, laughter, and the rustling of colorful clothes as parents gathered around with their children. Proud fathers stood tall, some in neat office suits, some in uniforms that gleamed under the morning sun. Mothers held their children's hands, fixing collars, adjusting ribbons, exchanging smiles with teachers. But amidst this scene of pride and belonging, Hamza stood frozen at the gate, his palms sweating, his eyes locked on the man walking slowly toward him. His father. Khalid. Not in a pilot's uniform. Not in anything that spoke of grandeur. He wore his same old oil-stained shellwork kameez, his sandals dusty from the walk, and his hands carrying a small box as if it contained the weight of his soul. For a second, Hamza's heart sank into his stomach. The whispers started almost instantly, sharp as knives cutting through the air. Deko, yahi hai Hamza kuabu? Yi to mechanic liked hain, someone muttered loudly. Danish's laughter erupted like a bomb. Pilot keh raha the na? Plane yadana ata haga isi? Ha ha ha. Plane ka tire change karega bias. The children roared with laughter, some parents glancing curiously, others shaking their heads in quiet judgment. Hamza felt his face burn, his throat dry, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. Every step his father took seemed heavier, slower, as though the whole world pushed against him. But Khalid's gaze never faltered. His eyes, a calm, unwavering, locked on his son's, carrying something Hamza couldn't yet understand. Shame? Pride? Or a secret too heavy for words? Khalid reached him and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Beta, Chelo, he said softly, his voice carrying strength. Hamza couldn't speak. His classmates circled around, whispering, mocking. Danish leaned closer, his smirk cruel. To yehi hai tum hair pilot Abu? Wa Hamza, jibbol main to tum be expert ho. Sabko biwakuf banaya. Hamza's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, to scream the truth, but he didn't even know what the truth was. He only knew one thing, his father was here. And maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than anyone could see. The assembly began. Parents were seated on wooden chairs, the principal speaking into the microphone about honor, respect, and the pride of family. One by one, children were invited to stand with their parents and introduce them. Doctors, engineers, teachers, all received applause. Then came the moment Hamza had dreaded. Hamza Ahmed, the principal's voice called out. His heart stopped. His father's hand squeezed his shoulder gently. Chelo Beta, Hansla Rocco. Together they walked to the front. The laughter and whispers followed like shadows. The principal smiled politely. Hamza, introduce your father to us. Hamza's lips trembled. The words stuck in his throat. Khalid stepped forward. He opened the box he had been carrying. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lay a worn but perfectly polished pilot's badge. Gasps spread across the audience. Khalid lifted it slowly, his hands steady, his voice deep and clear. Mainek pilot the, he said, every syllable echoing through the silence. Peli Pakistan Air Force main the. Ya mera badge hai, Mary Pechan. Main ISS Mulk Kuli ya Osman main Ladai Kt. Lekan ek hadsa hua, JIS ni sab badal dia. The crowd went still. Parents leaned in, children's eyes wide with disbelief. Hamza's own breath caught, his father's voice carried truth, pain, and pride. Khalid continued, Jab crash hua, main bak gaya, lekin mera career kadam ho gaya. Aaj main planes nahi adata. Main unhain thik karta hoon. Log kate hain ya choti bat hai. Lekin merely ye, har engine jo chal pata hai, har machine jo bakche ya faji keo shurikshit lajati hai, wobiak young hai. For a long moment, silence. No one laughed. No one mocked. Even Danish stood speechless, his smirk gone, his eyes darting nervously. Hamza's chest swelled, his shame melting into pride so strong it brought tears streaming down his cheeks. He whispered, Abu, Mudi Fakr Hai Aapp. Khalid placed the badge gently in his son's hands. Or Mudi Tum Par, Hamza. Jut Tum Nahi Bola. Lagan Ko Samaj Nahi T. Ab Hai. The principal, shaken, adjusted his glasses and spoke with emotion. Khalid Sahib, hum apki jazbi ko salam karti hain. Bakhan, Yad Rako, is it uniform senahi hodi, imandari or himadasa hodi hai? A thunder of claps erupted. Parents stood, applauding. Some even saluted. But amidst the cheers, one pair of eyes remained sharp, narrow, filled with something darker than jealousy. Danish's father, standing in the crowd, his jaw clenched tight. He turned to his son and whispered, Yabat yahin kadam nahi hogi. Hamza didn't notice. He only felt the warmth of his father's hand in his, the sound of applause washing over him. For the first time, he stood taller, prouder, stronger. But deep down, he couldn't shake the unease that flickered in his heart. The applause still echoed in Hamza's ears long after the assembly ended. For the first time in his life he felt like he wasn't invisible. Teachers came up to his father, shaking his hand with respect. Some students who once mocked him now stared at him with wide eyes, whispering about the revelation. Hamza's chest rose with pride, but somewhere deep in his heart, questions clawed at him. Why had his father kept this a secret for so long? What exactly had happened in that crash? And why did he sense a heaviness in his father's eyes that even applause couldn't erase? Later that day, while the crowd dispersed, Khalid stayed behind talking to the principal. Hamza wandered toward the playground, Aisha by his side. She smiled gently. Main kahadana, Hamza, tum jid nahi bolt. Tum hair abu waki bohat azim hain. Hamza managed to smile, but his eyes betrayed confusion. Like an Aisha, muhi like to hai kh kahani puri nahi hai. Abu ni sab kuch nahi bataya. She tilted her head, frowning. Kia Matlab? Before Hamza could answer, Danish walked past, his face red with anger. He shoved Hamza's shoulder. Apna show off enjoy Karlu. Lekan son, Abtumhuri is at hum tad kurahanj. His voice dripped with venom. Aisha stepped forward, glaring. Bas kar, Danish. Abituhi sharam nahi adi? But Danish only smirked darkly before walking away, his father watching silently from a distance, his expression unreadable. That night at home, the small house felt both lighter and heavier. Shazia served dinner with a proud smile, glancing at Khalid as though he had lifted a great burden. Deka? Ab sab ko pata chal gaya. Hamza ko dil esi boj uter gaya. Khalid nodded silently, eating slowly. Hamza pushed his food around, then finally asked, Abu, apan kaha the ek had sa huada? Lekin, kia huada the sol main?
Kia sach hai joap sabasi chupaya? The room grew tense. Khalid's hand froze midair. Shazia's eyes darted nervously. For a long moment, silence hung like a thick fog. Then Khalid spoke, his voice low. Hamza, kuch batain bashon kuliya nahi hodi. Tum abi chod ho. Hamza's eyes filled with frustration. Lekan abu, main jut sun kujina nahi chada. Aapi mir hero ho, lekan mui sachche. Khalid's face tightened. Das. Abi wakt nahi.
His tone ended the conversation. But the unanswered questions only grew heavier in Hamza's heart. That night, long after his parents had gone to sleep, Hamza sat by the window, staring at the moonlight spilling across the alley. The sounds of the city at night, distant horns, barking dogs, vendors packing up their stalls, mixed with his restless thoughts. He whispered to himself, Main sach Sarah Orjan Kar Rahanga. Days passed, but unease never left. At school, students treated Hamza differently, some with respect, some with envy, some still whispering doubts. Danish's taunts grew sharper, though now laced with bitterness. But Hamza noticed something else. Danish's father, Mr. Rahman, seemed to watch him and his father closely, his gaze often lingering too long, his expression carrying secrets of its own. One evening, Hamza followed his father quietly. Instead of heading toward the small workshop where he usually repaired engines, Khalid walked toward the bus stand. Hamza's heart raced. He hid behind walls and stalls, careful not to be seen. His father boarded a bus heading toward the outskirts of the city. Hamza, without thinking, scrambled after him, slipping inside just before the doors closed. The ride was long, winding through dark streets, then into quieter industrial areas. Finally Khalid stepped off near an abandoned hangar, its rusted gates looming like silent guardians. Hamza's breath caught. His father entered. Hamza, staying low, crept closer and peered through a broken window. Inside, under dim lights, were men he had never seen before. Some wore uniforms with no insignia, others plain clothes. Maps and blueprints covered the tables. And in the center, covered with tarps, stood the skeleton of an aircraft. Khalid spoke with a man in a deep voice. Hamwaktesi pichi chal rahi hain. Agar ye mission same par pora navwa tonatija bohat katarnak haga. The man replied sharply, or Agar unko pada chal gayato? Tum malum hai ka tumhara past already unk nigahan main hai. Khalid's face hardened. Main dar kar piche nahi hat sakta. Ya mulk ka masla hai. Main fur sayudain ko tayar hun Agar marijan bideni patito. Hamza's knees buckled. His father, still a pilot? Still connected to something far bigger than a simple workshop? His mind swirled with fear and awe. But before he could process it, a hand clamped over his mouth. He struggled, panic rising, until he turned and saw the face, Danish. Ah, Pakta Gaya. Danish hissed. Main tumhara picha kar raha. Tumher abu jobi kar rahi hain, ab main sabko batanga. Hamza's eyes widened with terror. He shook his head violently, trying to free himself, but Danish tightened his grip. Tum samaj to tum special ho? Tum her abu hero hain? Abdeko main kais tumhari kahani tata hun. Suddenly a noise came from inside the hangar. Someone had heard them. Flashlights beamed through the darkness, footsteps rushing closer. Danish let go, both boys scrambling in panic. Kaun hai wahen, a voice barked. Hamza grabbed Danish's hand instinctively, pulling him into the shadows. They ran through the bushes, hearts pounding, barely escaping the beams of light. They didn't stop until they reached the main road, gasping for breath. Danish collapsed on the sidewalk, laughing breathlessly. What, to tumher abu ab bijishi mission main hain? Ya to or be mazdar hai? Ab main tum kodega nahi. Hamza's voice cracked. Danish, please, ya sab secret hai. Egar tum kuch bola to abu katra main pad janj. Danish's smile faded, his eyes glinting with something cruel. Or moody kia malega agar main chup rehin? Hamza stared at him, fear and anger twisting inside. Danish leaned closer. Tum mui jute banate rahi.
Ab Mary Bari Hai. Yato tum Maribatan Parchail, Yamain Tumhuri Denaya Tabakar Dunga.
Hamza felt trapped, his mind spinning. He had wanted the truth, but this truth was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And now it wasn't just about protecting his father's honor. It was about protecting his father's life. The night after the secret hangar incident, Hamza barely slept. His mind was a storm, torn between fear and pride. He had seen his father in a way no one else had, standing like a man carrying the weight of the nation on his shoulders. But he had also seen Danish's cruel smile, the threat in his eyes, the danger of what would happen if even a single word slipped out. At breakfast, Shazia noticed his pale face. Hamza Beta, Tabiyat Thik Hai? Like a high rat bar soy nahi. He forced a smile. Main Thikun, Ami. But his father's gaze lingered on him, sharp, knowing. Khalid had always been able to read Hamza without words. Later that day at school, Hamza sat nervously at his desk, waiting. Danish entered the classroom, his smirk firmly in place. He walked straight up to Hamza and whispered, Mui samaj aa gaya hai kutir abu ab plain sajudi koi cheez kar rahi hain. Agar tu chata hai ko main chup rahan, to tuhi meri har bad mani hogi. Hamza's stomach churned. Tum kia chat ho? Danish leaned closer, his voice low but dripping with malice.
Sab kuch. Mera homework karna. Pays dina. Jo main kahan. Samja? Warna main sabko batadonga. Hamza's fists clenched under the desk. Aisha noticed his expression and leaned forward. Kia hua, Hamza? Danish shot her a glare. Ya bat tamase nahin hai, Samaji? For the next few days, Hamza's life became torture. Danish forced him to carry his books, buy him snacks, even take blame for pranks Danish himself pulled. Hamza wanted to fight back, but the image of his father surrounded by those men, the words mission and danger, echoed in his mind. If Danish told the wrong person, everything could collapse. Still, Hamza's silence didn't stop the whispers. Some children started noticing how Danish ordered him around. Some mocked, some pitied, some just watched curiously. Aisha, however, wasn't fooled. One afternoon, she cornered Hamza behind the library. Yes sab kia hai? Danish tum kyan control kar raha hai? Tum use rock kyan nahi rahi? Hamza looked away, his throat tightening. Aisha, tum samaj nahi payogi. Agar main kuch bola to. Abu mushkil main pad jayanj. Her eyes widened. Tum hair abu? Lekin kais? Hamza, tum muhi sab kuch bateo. Main tum hara soth dungi. His eyes filled with tears. Main bata nahi sakta. Yes surf mir or abu kudar mi in hai. Aisha's heart ached at his pain, but she nodded. Thik hai. Lekin yad rakna, tum akela nahi ho. That night, as Hamza walked home alone, a car slowed beside him. The tinted window rolled down. Inside sat Mr. Rahman, Danish's father. His smile was cold, calculated. Hamza Beta, Zara Batkarni T. Hamza froze. Gee, uncle? Rahman gestured for him to come closer. Tumher Abu Bait interesting admi hain. Main unhain purain dynanasi jantahun. Lekin tumhain shayad malum nahi ka tumher abu ka past main bohat seres hain. Hamza's breath caught. Rahman's eyes narrowed. Woras jo agar samni aage, to tumher abu ko sab kuch kona pad sakta hai. Samj? Hamza's voice shook. AAP kia kena chathain? Rahman leaned back in his seat. Biasid na kena hai ko apni abu sakena, wakt kem hai. Unka mission jobi hai, main use rockni walahun. Or tumhari madad ko baghair wo bacha nahi payanj. The window rolled up, the car drove off, leaving Hamza trembling on the dark street. His father had an enemy far closer than he realized. When Hamza reached home, Khalid was waiting, sitting silently in the courtyard. The dim bulb above his head cast deep shadows across his weary face. Hamza, idhar aao, he said softly. Hamza sat beside him. Khalid stared into the distance before speaking. Tum moody kuchpukna hai na? Hamza's heart pounded. He wanted to tell him everything about Danish, about the blackmail, about Rahman's warning. But fear choked him. Khalid turned and looked straight into his son's eyes. Beta, yad rakna, sachkabi chupaya nahi jaa sakta. Lekin kabi sach waktesi peli samajna katarnak hoda hai. Hamza bit his lip, whispering, Abu, aap mujskia chupa rahi ho? Before Khalid could answer, a loud knock rattled the front door. Shazia rushed out of the kitchen, startled. Khalid stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for the box where his old badge lay. The knocking grew louder, more urgent. Hamza's heart raced. The pounding on the door grew louder, each knock echoing like thunder in the small house. Shazia froze, her hands trembling against her dupatta. Khalid rose slowly, his face stern, his body tense like a soldier ready for battle. Hamza's heart thudded in his chest, fear clawing at him. Abu, kaun hai? Khalid held a finger to his lips, signaling silence. He stepped carefully toward the door and called out, Kaun? For a moment, there was no reply. Then a deep, unfamiliar voice answered, Humlog bot karne hain. Darwaza call du. The tone was calm, but something about it made Shazia clutch Hamza's shoulder tightly. Khalid hesitated, then slowly unlatched the lock. As the door creaked open, 3 men stood outside, shadows cast across their stern faces by the flickering streetlight. They weren't ordinary visitors, their posture was sharp, their eyes alert, their presence heavy. The one in front, a tall man in a grey coat, stepped forward. Khalid Sahib, Humi and Anhar Ain Du. Zarori Guftagu Hai. Khalid's jaw tightened. He glanced at Shazia, then back at the men. Hamari Guftagu Bahar Biho Sakti Hai. The man's lips curved in a thin smile. Na hin. Jo Kana Hai, Yahan Kana Zarori Hai. Reluctantly, Khalid moved aside. The men entered, their boots scraping against the worn floor. Hamza shrank back, watching with wide eyes. The tall man scanned the room, then fixed his gaze on Khalid. Apko fur bulaya gaya hai. Mission te ho gaya hai. Or aap ki zarorat hai. Shazia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nahin, ab or nahin. Khalid, tum wada kia the family kuliya sab kuch choddia. Khalid's face hardened. Main kaha the ku main peach hat gaya hoon. Main obsurf ek mechanic hoon. The man's eyes darkened. Mechanic? Aap janti hain ko aap ki skills mechanic ki nahi, mult korekwel ki hain. Hamara deshek nahi mushkil main hai. Or aap ko for esi osman main nahaga. Hamza's breath caught. His father, flying again? The room buzzed with tension. Khalid shook his head. Main dobara nahi kar sakta. Jo wadi, jo crash wadi, uski bad main dobara cockpit main nahi baith sakta. The man's voice dropped, sharp and threatening. For sun lijai, agar aapini manikia, to aap koraz dushman kohath lag janj. Or for na aap shurikshit rahenge, na apki family. Shazia staggered, whispering, Alariam. Hamza's heart pounded like a drum. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. His father was being forced into something dangerous, something that could destroy them all. Khalid's fists clenched. Moody whacked Chahi. The tall man nodded slightly. Teen din surf teen din uski bad faisla apka nahi haga. With that, the men turned and left, their footsteps fading into the night, leaving behind a silence so heavy it suffocated. Shazia broke down, tears spilling as she grabbed Khalid's arm. Khalid, tum fur se wahan jane ka sak bi kai sakt ho? Tum hari ek hai jan hai. Hamara ek hai beta hai. Main tum kona nahi chadi. Khalid closed his eyes, pain etched into every line of his face. Shazia, main bi nahi chada. Lekin kabi mulk ki katir family is a beret kurbani and deni pati hain. Hamza stepped forward, his voice trembling. Abu, main biapko kona nahi chada. lekin, aap kia sach main hero hain? Kia aap sach main wapas jayanj?
Khalid knelt before him, holding his shoulders firmly.
Hamza, Yad Rocco. Hero wo nahi hoda jo jang jitkar ata hai. Hero wo hoda hai jo sach or duty asi peach nahi hatta. Or agar waktani moody dobara bulaya, tomain fur yuthunga.
Hamza's eyes filled with tears, but inside, something sparked a flame of pride mixed with fear. That night, as the family tried to rest, Hamza lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. His mind spun with images of the secret hangar, the strange men, his father's trembling hands.
He whispered to himself, Muyi kuch karna haga. Main chup nahi ray sakta. The next morning at school, Hamza was exhausted, but Danish was waiting for him with his usual smirk. Ariwa, kal rat tumher gar mayman bieda? Mir abu ni deka. Tum samacht ho main chupra hunga? Ubto tumhari family ki kahani or be mazdar lagti hai. Hamza's eyes widened. Tum kais pada? Danish leaned close. Main kahadana, sab mary marzi se kalega. Tum sak bi nahi sakt kumir abu kitnakuch janti hain. A chill ran down Hamza's spine. Mr. Rahman, of course.
The man who had warned him, threatened him.
This wasn't coincidence. Danish wasn't acting alone, he was a pawn in his father's game. But what did Mr. Rahman want? Why was he so interested in Khalid's past? The day dragged on, Hamza unable to focus, dread building inside him. After school, he decided he couldn't wait any longer.
He had to confront his father directly, force the truth out. But when he reached home, the door was slightly ajar.
His stomach dropped. He stepped inside carefully, calling out, Ami? Abu? Silence.
The living room was empty, chairs pushed aside as though in a hurry. A half-cooked pot sat on the stove, still steaming.
Ami,
he called louder, his voice cracking. Then he saw it, on the table lay the pilot's badge, and beside it, a note scrawled in his father's handwriting.
His trembling hands picked it up.
The words sent a shiver down his spine, Hamza, Moody din ki koshish mat karna.
Agar main lot karna aya, totam meri kahani denaya ko sanana. Tumhara abu. Hamza's knees buckled.
His father was gone. Hamza stared at the note in his trembling hands, his mind spinning so fast he could barely breathe. His father had left, disappearing into the shadows of a mission too big for him to understand. His throat tightened as tears blurred the words, but his heart screamed with only one thought, I have to find him. At that moment, the front door creaked and Shazia stumbled in, her dupatta tangled, her face pale.
Hamza! Tumgar main ho?
She gasped for air, clutching her chest.
Hamza ran to her. Ami, Abu Kahan hain? Ya note, ya matlab kia hai?
Shazia collapsed into a chair, pressing her hands over her face.
Wo chalai gay. Mugi surf ya kh kar nikal ku agar main kuch puchin to jawab nahi milega. Khalid, versi usi rast pichal pada hai jahan sa wapas ana mushkil hai. Hamza knelt before her, holding her hands. Ami, main kuch karunga. Main abu ko wapas longa. Shazia's teary eyes searched his face. Hamza, tum surf like bachi ho. Ya tumher bas ki bat nahi. But Hamza shook his head fiercely. Main bachi hoon, lekin main apka beta bihun. Abu ani moody sach batan seroka, lekin main anhi akela nahi kadunga.
That evening, Hamza rushed to Aisha's house. She opened the door, surprised at his frantic face.
Hamza? Kia hua?
He shoved the note into her hands. She read it silently, her eyes widening.
Oh no, tumher abu, wo chalai gay? Hamza's voice cracked. Or moody kaha kudun namat. Lekin main chup nahi by thunga. Aisha, moody tumhari madad shahi.
She hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes, but then nodded firmly.
Theek hai. Hum mil kar anhi dunhenge.
They sat together, whispering plans under the dim light of a lantern.
Socho, Hamza. Tum kaha the kutum apni abu koek hanger main dekada. Wahi si shuru kardi hain. Hamza's heart raced. Lekin wo jaga bohat katarnak hai. Wahan unksaf or log the. Agar unhon humian dekliato, Aisha cut him off. Hum careful rahenge. Lekin tum akele kuch nahi karsakt. Mui saf lejeo.
That night, under the cover of darkness, the two slipped out of their houses, their small shadows stretching long under the streetlights. The city grew quieter as they moved toward the outskirts, the air colder, the roads emptier. Hamza's stomach twisted with fear, but Aisha's determined steps gave him strength. Finally, they reached the rusted gates of the abandoned hangar. The same place where Hamza had seen his father days ago. They crouched behind bushes, peering through gaps. Inside, the faint glow of lights flickered. Men moved around, their voices echoing faintly. And there, at the center, stood Khalid, dressed in a plain uniform, his face grim as he studied maps spread across a table.
Hamza's heart leapt. Abu, he whispered.
But before they could move closer, a voice hissed behind them.
Kia kar rahi hotam dano yahan?
Hamza spun around, his blood turning cold. Danish stood there, arms crossed, a wicked smile curling on his lips.
Moody pata the tum for yahan aoj. Tum like to high main tum chod duna? Aisha's eyes blazed. Danish, tum sharam nahi adi? Yahamari family ka maslahai. Danish smirked. Mui kia. Mui surf maizase matlab hai. Tum dano jokar rahi ho, main apni abu ko bada dunga. Or jabmir abu ko sab pada kalega, to tumher abu kuliya sab kuchkadam.
Hamza's fists clenched.
Tum samaj to tum bohat chalak ho? Tum kuch pata hai nahi. Tum surf apni abu kohath ka kalona ho.
Danish's smile faltered for a second, but then returned.
Chahijobi ho, tumher abu mushkil main hain. Or mainus mushkil ko or barha dunga.
Before Hamza or Aisha could stop him, Danish turned and bolted into the darkness, his footsteps fading.
Hamza's chest tightened in panic. Wo apni abu ko sab bada dega. Hamari jaga, hamara plan, sab kadam hojayega. Aisha grabbed his arm. Hamza, abdur nahi karni. Humi and andar jana haga. Abi.
Taking a deep breath, they crept along the hangar wall, finding a broken side door. Slipping inside, their eyes widened at the sight before them.
It wasn't just a hangar. It was a secret base.
Half-built aircraft stood under dim lights, tools scattered, blueprints pinned to walls. Men moved like shadows, their conversations urgent. At the center, Khalid argued with the same tall man from before.
Main kaha the mui wakt shahi. Main abi tayar nahi.
The man slammed his fist on the table.
Apki pas wakt nahi hai. Dushman hum par hamla karn wala hai. Agar aapin cockpit nahi samhala, to sab kuch barbad ho jayega.
Khalid's face twisted with anguish.
Main dobara nahi kar sakta. Us crash ko bad main furas a control nahi sambal sakta.
The man's voice turned harsh.
Khalid Saib, apko chod kar humar pas koi nahi. Yato aap tayar ho jayan, yafur samaj lijai ko apki family shurakshid nahi rahegi. Hamza's breath caught in his throat. Aisha clutched his arm. Hamza, to bohat bara mamla hai. Tumher abu surf mechanic nahi, wo abi be soldier hain.
Suddenly, a shadow loomed behind them.
A hand clamped on Hamza's shoulder. He spun around, eyes wide, staring into the furious face of one of the guards. Tum dano yahan kia kar rahi ho?
Hamza froze, his heart pounding so loud he thought the whole hangar could hear it. Aisha gasped, her lips trembling. They had been caught. The guard's grip on Hamza's shoulder tightened like iron, his eyes burning with suspicion.
Tum dano yahan guskar kia karna chad ho?
Hamza's mouth opened but no words came out, his throat dry, his heart hammering in panic. Aisha tried to speak, her voice trembling. The guard yanked them forward, dragging them into the center of the hangar. Men turned, conversations halted, and all eyes fell on the two children.
Khalid's head snapped up. His face went pale.
"Hamza," he shouted, stepping forward, but the tall man in the gray coat blocked his way.
Ya kia mamla hai? Ya bakyahan kais pohanchge? The guard shoved Hamza and Aisha to the ground.
"Sir, ya chupkar andar gus rahitha.
Lagta hai ya sabdek sun rahitha."
The tall man's eyes narrowed dangerously.
Dubashon kayahan hona, ya masumiat kamamla nahi lagta? Shayad jishi in ian hain beja hai.
He leaned down, his voice sharp as a knife.
Tum dono kaun ho? Kis ku liya kom kardi ho? Hamza's chest heaved.
Main sir funka beta hun, he stammered, pointing at Khalid.
Or ya meri dost hai. Hum bias abu ko dun netha.
A murmur spread through the room. The tall man straightened, glaring at Khalid.
Toya apki hain. Aap apni family kob control nahi karsakt, or hum apko mult kuliya zimadari din kasak rahi hain?
Khalid's face flushed with anger and shame. He stepped forward, placing himself between the men and the children.
Mir bet ko kodo. Ya surf bacha hai. Usan kuch nahi suna.
But Hamza's wide eyes betrayed the truth. He had seen, he had heard, and he now carried secrets too dangerous for a child. The tall man's gaze hardened.
Is bak ko hum yahanase jain nahi desakt. Agar ya bahar gaya, to sara res kul jayega.
Khalid's voice rose like thunder.
Mir bet ko ungli bi lagai to main sab kuch tad dunga. For a tense moment, silence fell.
The men shifted uncomfortably, no one wanted to challenge Khalid's fury. Finally, the tall man raised his hand.
Thik hai. Lekin in hain abi torrent yahan se nikal du. Khalid Saib, samaj j agar furs apka beta yahan dekagaya, to anjamach nahi haga.
Two guards dragged Hamza and Aisha toward the broken side door. Khalid's eyes met Hamza's, a storm of fear and love in them.
He mouthed silently, "Jo."
Outside, the night air hit them like a slap.
Hamza stumbled, tears stinging his eyes. Aisha clutched his arm. "Hamza, tum thik ho?"
He shook his head violently.
"Abu andar hai, or wo akeli hain. Wo log un himej bor kar rahi hain. Hum kuch nahi kar pay."
His voice cracked, guilt eating him alive. They hurried back toward the city, but Hamza's mind refused to rest. His father was trapped in a mission too dangerous to refuse, too secret to escape.
And now Hamza had become a part of it.
The next morning, Danish was waiting for him outside school. His grin was crueler than ever.
"To, tum sosha the mui biwakof bana doj? Main sab janta hoon. Tum kal ratwapas hanger gatha." Hamza froze, his heart sinking. "Tum kais pada?"
Danish leaned closer, whispering.
"Mir abu ko har jaga admi hain.
Tumhari har harkat par nazar raki ja rehi hai.
Tumhar abu korez, joli mir abu kohath main hung.
Or fur deko kia hoda hai." Hamza's fists clenched, rage boiling inside.
"Tum or tumhar abu, tum log galat ho. Mara abu desh kuliya kam kar rahi hain.
Tum log surfun hi barbad karna chat ho."
Danish's smirk deepened. "Or tum un hi bacha nahi payoj."
He turned and walked away, leaving Hamza shaking with helpless fury. Later that day, Hamza and Aisha met secretly behind the school library.
"Hamza, ya sab bohat barakatra hai. Danish ko abu, wo sab janti hain.
Agar unhon hanger whale logon ko expose kardia, totum her abu kadam hojayanj." Hamza slammed his fist against the wall, his eyes burning.
"Main chup nahi rahanga. Mui kuch karna hoga. Mudi abu ki matted karni hogi."
Aisha gripped his shoulder.
"Lekin kais? Hum surf bakche hain." Hamza's gaze hardened.
"Lekin hum sach dek chuk hain.
Or sach janani kubad chup rena guna hai." That night, Hamza decided to follow Mr. Rahman. If Danish's father was planning something, he had to know what it was.
He slipped out of his house, heart pounding, keeping to the shadows. He followed the sleek black car as it wound through narrow streets until it stopped at a grand bungalow.
Hamza crept closer, hiding behind a tree, peering through the high iron gates.
Inside, Mr. Rahman stood with two strangers, their silhouettes sharp under the porch light.
One of them handed him a file.
Hamza strained to hear, his pulse racing.
Rahman's cold voice carried through the night. Sab evidence mir pas hai. Khalid ki puri kahani, uska crash, uska secret kam, sab kuch. Main kl suba takya lagan kusami rak dunga. Uski bad na wo pilot rahiga, na hero. Uska na midi main mil jaega. Hamza's stomach twisted.
His father's life, his honor, everything was about to be destroyed. And he was powerless to stop it.
Suddenly, a twig snapped under his foot.
The sound was sharp in the silence.
Rahman's head jerked up.
His eyes scanned the darkness.
Kaun hai wahan?
Guards rushed toward the gates, flashlights slicing through the night.
Hamza's breath caught. He had been seen.
Hamza's heart thundered in his chest as beams of flashlights cut through the dark, swinging wildly across the gates and the trees beyond.
He crouched low, pressing himself against the rough trunk, praying his racing breaths wouldn't give him away.
The guards' footsteps pounded closer, their voices sharp.
Idhar. Koi hai yahan. Hamza panicked. If they caught him, Rahman would know everything, that he was spying, that he had overheard.
The thought of his father's enemy looking him in the eye sent chills down his spine. He bolted. His small feet pounded against the dirt road as he darted into the narrow alley behind the bungalow.
Shouts erupted behind him.
Pak do you say?
Flashlight beams bounced against the walls as the guards gave chase. Hamza zigzagged through the maze-like streets, his lungs burning, his mind screaming at him to run faster.
A barking dog startled him as he dashed past, almost tripping over a loose stone, but he pushed himself harder.
The alley suddenly split into two.
For a second he froze, then darted left, his instinct pulling him toward the darker, narrower path. The guard's footsteps echoed, closer and closer.
Yahan gaya hai.
Sweat streamed down his face. He turned another corner and collided with a stack of wooden crates, tumbling hard to the ground. Pain shot through his knees, but he scrambled up just as flashlight beams flickered near the corner. He spotted an old metal gate half open ahead and dove inside, crouching low. The gate creaked softly as he pulled it shut behind him. Inside was an abandoned courtyard filled with broken bicycles, rusted tools, and weeds growing through the cracks. Hamza pressed himself against the wall, barely daring to breathe. The guards stormed past, their voices fading. Shayad Dusar Rast Chala Gaya. Jaldi, Age Deko. Hamza sagged against the wall, his chest heaving. He had escaped, but only barely. Then he froze. From inside the courtyard came a different sound, a low cough, weak and rasping.
Hamza's eyes adjusted to the darkness.
In the corner, slumped against a wall, sat an old man with a frail body, wrapped in a torn shawl. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp as they fixed on Hamza. Tum, yahan kyane ho, back, the old man asked, his voice tired but curious. Hamza hesitated, fear still clinging to him.
Main bias chupnayada.
The man studied him quietly for a moment, then nodded.
Tum jishi se bog rahi ho. Tum hurry ankon main cow for sach dano hai. Hamza swallowed, whispering, Wo log mir abu ku dushman hain. Wo unka nam barbad karna chat hain.
The old man's eyes glinted.
Tum hair abu ka nam. Call it? Hamza's breath caught. Aap, apko abu ka nam kaispada?
The old man looked away, his voice heavy with memory.
Main unka dost the.
Bahut Sal Peli.
Jab wo Osman main udthir sab unhain hero kate the.
Hamza stared, stunned.
Aap. Abu ko janti hain?
The man nodded faintly.
Unhon mui zindagi dt ek crash kawakt. Lekin uski bad sab kuch badal gaya. Roman or uski log tabase unka pichakar rahi hain. Hamza's head spun. To aap janti ho kawo kia karna chad hain? The man coughed again, spitting to the side. Raman apni matlab kuliya sab kuch karsakta hai. Wo khalid ko badnam karna chada hai, or us mission ko bi rakna chada hai jo molt kuliya zarori hai.
Hamza's fists clenched.
Main anhi rokanga. Main abu ki isat bachoanga.
The old man gave a faint, broken laugh. Tum surf back ho, lekin tumhari ankhan main wawag hai jo main khalid main deki ti.
Shayad tum uski sahiwaris ho.
He reached into his shawl and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age.
Ya lo. Ya ek jaga ka naksha hai. Wahan tum wo sab miliga jo Raman kaplans ko rakni kuliya zarori hai. Hamza took the paper with trembling hands.
Before he could ask more, a voice thundered from outside the gate.
Ko jo. Yahan bideko.
The old man's eyes widened.
Jo, back. Der ho rehi hai. Jaldi.
Hamza tucked the paper into his pocket and scrambled up the wall, dropping down into the street on the other side just as flashlights swept across the courtyard he had escaped from. His heart pounded as he sprinted home under the veil of night, the paper feeling like fire in his pocket. When he finally stumbled into his room, Shazia was asleep, her face tired from worry.
Hamza sat in the dark, pulling out the paper.
His hands shook as he unfolded it. It was indeed a map of the city outskirts, marked with red circles and strange symbols. One spot was circled twice, with the words written faintly in pencil, "Final test."
Hamza's eyes widened. Was this where his father's mission would be decided? And if Raman got there first, would everything be destroyed?
Suddenly, a shadow loomed across his window.
Hamza's heart leapt into his throat. A whisper came through the glass.
Hamza, he turned slowly and froze. Danish was outside, his face pale, his eyes burning with something darker than before.
Main sab janta hoon. Tum her pas wo naksha hai, na? Moody Daikato.
Warna, his whisper cut through the silence like a blade.
Hamza's blood ran cold.
Danish had found him. Hamza froze, his fists clutching the fragile paper so tightly it threatened to tear. Danish's pale face pressed against the glass, his whisper like poison.
Moody naksha du, Hamza. Warna kl tak tumher abu ki kahani kadam hojaegi. Hamza's pulse raced.
Every part of him wanted to scream, to throw the paper out the window just to make Danish disappear, but something inside, his father's unshakable eyes, his mother's trembling hands, told him he couldn't give in.
Tum kuch nahi milega, Hamza whispered back fiercely, his voice shaking yet firm. Danish's lips curled into a mocking smile. Samaj jo. Tum or tumhara abu, dano kolona ho. Mera abu kud sab kuch apni hoth main lo raha hai. Tum muyirak nahi sakt. Hamza's jaw tightened. Mir abu hero hain. Tum hair abu surf jib bolt hain.
Danish's face darkened, his fist banging against the glass.
Aaj tum like to hai tum chalak ho. Liken kale, jab tum hara abu sabki samni badnam haga, tum sablog aro rahi hog. Or main hansunga.
He slipped into the night, his shadow vanishing into the street.
Hamza collapsed onto the floor, shaking.
He had no time to lose. If Danish told his father about the map, they would reach the final test first.
He needed help.
The next morning, before school, Hamza rushed to Aisha's house. She opened the door, startled by his panicked face.
Hamza? Tum thick ho?
He thrust the map into her hands, whispering hurriedly.
Aisha, Danish janta hai. Usan kal rat mui dam kaya. Egar uski abu koyoya naksha milgaya to abu barbad hojayanj.
Aisha studied the faded paper, her brows furrowed. Ya jaga, ya to city ka bahar ka Purana airfield hai.
Wahin sab kuch hon wala hai?
Hamza nodded, his voice trembling.
Han. Humi and Abu Ko warn Karna Haga. Aisha's eyes shone with determination. Lekin Wahan Jana Katarnak Haga. Shayad Humi and Jishi bade Ko involve Karna Chahi. Hamza shook his head. Nahi. Hum jishi par barosa nahi kar sokt. Roman ko admi har jaga hain. Surf humabu tak punch sokt hain.
Aisha bit her lip, then nodded slowly.
Thik hai. Lekin hum careful rena haga.
That afternoon, while the school buzzed with chatter, Hamza noticed Danish sitting at the back of the class, scribbling furiously on a piece of paper. His smirk gave away everything. He was writing a note, probably for his father.
Hamza's stomach twisted. They had no time.
After school, Hamza and Aisha slipped away before Danish could follow, clutching the map like their only weapon. They boarded an old bus heading to the outskirts, their bodies pressed against the rattling windows as the city slowly thinned into barren land. Dust swirled outside, the setting sun casting long shadows.
Hamza's heart wouldn't stop pounding. He remembered his father's warning, Sachwaktese peli samajnat katarnak hoda hai. And yet here he was, chasing the truth. The bus dropped them near the abandoned airfield.
The place was vast and eerie, the silence broken only by the whistling wind through broken hangars. Rusted fences loomed, their paint peeling, while a half-collapsed control tower stood like a skeleton.
Hamza spread the map across a rock, tracing the circle marked Final Test.
It pointed to one of the larger hangars at the edge of the field.
Wahin Humi and Jana Haga, he said, his voice barely above a whisper.
They crept toward the hangar, their steps crunching softly on gravel. Through a crack in the metal wall, they peered inside. What they saw made their blood run cold.
A massive, sleek aircraft stood ready, far newer than the wreckage outside.
Around it, men in uniform moved swiftly, checking engines, loading crates, preparing for something monumental. And in the middle stood Khalid, his face tense, his hands gripping a helmet.
Hamza's breath caught. Abu, but before joy could settle, his eyes shifted and froze.
At the far corner, in the shadows, stood Mr. Rahman, speaking to the tall man in the gray coat. His voice was low but laced with triumph.
BASEC press conference KAL Subatire High.
In Sab Files Kobad, Khalid Ek Gatter Korup Main Samni Iega.
Uski Bad, Joya aircraft Lake Niklega, Uska Nam Hamara Haga. Hamza's stomach turned. Rahman wasn't just destroying Khalid's reputation, he wanted to steal the mission itself. Aisha gripped his arm, whispering, Hamza, Humi and Unhi warn Karna Haga. Before Hamza could respond, a loud creak echoed behind them.
They spun around only to see Danish stepping out from the shadows, a cruel smile on his face.
Moody Pata the Tum Dano Yahan Aoj. His eyes flicked to the map clutched in Hamza's fist.
Ab Moody Sab Sabut Milgaya.
Biasya Paperchai, or Fur Mera Abu Sab Kuch Control Karega.
Hamza's body froze, every instinct screaming to run, but his grip on the map only tightened. Danish stepped closer, his smirk widening.
Do. Warna main Shilounga, or Tum Dano fans Jayoj. Aisha stepped forward, blocking Hamza.
Her voice shook but was firm.
Danish, Tum Samaj Nahi Ada? Tum Hair Abu Galat Hain. Wo Sir Fapni Matlab Kuliya Sab Kuch Barbad Karna Chad Hain. Hamza Kuabu Desh Kuliya Lad Rahi Hain. Danish's smile faltered, just for a flicker of a second, but his arrogance returned quickly. Moody Fark Nahi Padta. Moody Surf Jeet Nahai.
He lunged for the paper. Hamza twisted, yanking it away, and the three of them grappled in the dust. Hamza's knees scraped the ground, Aisha tried to shove Danish back, and Danish's nails dug into Hamza's wrist as he snarled, Yanak Shamara Hai. Suddenly, heavy footsteps thundered from the hangar.
Voices shouted. Kaun Hai Wahan?
A flashlight beam swept across the ground, catching them in its glow. Hamza froze, his heart slamming against his ribs. Danish staggered back, his eyes wide as the guards stormed toward them.
The paper slipped from Hamza's grasp, fluttering to the ground. And the first guard's boot landed squarely on it. The men stared down at the children, their faces darkening with fury. Fur Tum, one of them barked. Pakdo Unhain.
Hamza and Aisha's hearts stopped as rough hands reached for them. They had been caught again. But this time, Rahman himself was only a few steps away. The guards yanked Hamza and Aisha off the ground, their cries muffled by rough hands gripping their arms.
The torn paper lay crumpled in the dust, its secrets now in the open. The men dragged them inside the hangar, tossing them down onto the cold concrete floor. Shadows loomed above as workers and soldiers stopped their tasks to stare. Hamza's heart hammered wildly as his eyes flicked upward and locked onto Rahman.
The man's tall figure emerged from the shadows, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, his lips curling into a slow, victorious smile.
To, Tumho Khalid Kabeda.
His voice was calm, but it carried venom that chilled Hamza's bones.
Moody liked the tum surfek sharardi bacha ho, lekin tum demir plans karast main kata ho gay.
He bent down slightly, his eyes narrowing.
Ab bateo. Naksha tum kisna dia?
Hamza's lips quivered, but he pressed them shut. He would not betray the old man who had trusted him.
Rahman's face hardened.
He gestured to a guard.
Uski dost ko utheo.
The guard hauled Aisha to her feet, gripping her arm tightly. Her eyes widened, her body trembling, but she didn't cry out.
Rahman's voice dropped, soft and cruel. Tumhuri himat dekni layak hai. Lekin himat or zid main fark hoda hai, Hamza. Agar tumnavi sechna bola, toya ladki tumhuri zid ki kimat chikayaji. Hamza's chest burned.
Nahi, he shouted, struggling against the guard's grip.
Asi koto. Rahman's smirk widened. Tofur bolo. Kisna tum naksha dia? Hamza's mind screamed, but his lips stayed shut.
Just then, a voice boomed from across the hangar.
Bah! Everyone turned.
Khalid strode forward, his helmet still in his hand, his face like thunder. His eyes blazed as they locked on Rahman.
Mir bet ko haf lagaya to main tumhain zinda nahi kadunga.
Rahman straightened, his smug smile unbroken.
Dako Zara, Hammer Hero Aa Gay. Lekin Hero Surf Filman main back 8 hain, Khalid. Hakikad main, tum kud apni family ko apni se sibi nahi bacha sokt.
Khalid's fists clenched, his voice rising.
Rahman, tum hamesha sa gather the. Tum molt ko bekni ki koshish ki, or ab tum mir nam ko bi midi main milana chadho. Lekin ya mission tum hair hath nahi iega. Rahman chuckled darkly. Mission? Tum ab bi apni apko layak samaj to? Tum hura crash sabko yad hai. Tum huri gulti eni kai zindaji in loli ti. Or ab main denaya koa wo sechtai konga jo tum chupede ho. Tum ek sharman daji ho, Khalid.
Khalid's jaw tightened, guilt flashing in his eyes, but his voice didn't falter.
Main gur gaya the, lekin main toda nahi. Or main fur sa adn ko tayarhun. Tum huri wajah se, main apni family ko kutra main nahi deksakta.
As the tension crackled between them, Hamza struggled free for a moment and shouted, his voice breaking.
Abu. Unk pas sabut hain. Wo kl sabki samni apko gatter sabit karn whale hain. Gasps rippled through the workers. Whispers filled the air. Rahman's smirk deepened, pleased that his plan had been spoken aloud.
He stepped closer to Khalid, lowering his voice so only the family could hear.
Tumher bet ki masumi eni mir liya kamasan kardia. Abto tumhari is it or be jaldi midi main milaji. Khalid's face twisted in rage.
He lunged, grabbing Rahman by the collar. The hangar erupted in chaos as guards rushed forward, men shouted, and Hamza cried out. Aisha was shoved back to the floor, wincing as her elbows scraped the concrete. In the struggle, the crumpled map skittered across the floor, stopping near the boot of the tall man in the gray coat. He bent down, picked it up, and studied it quietly while everyone else focused on Khalid and Rahman. His sharp eyes flicked from the paper to Khalid's furious face. Slowly, a calculating smile spread across his lips. He slipped the map into his coat pocket without a word. Hamza saw it, his heart lurching.
Abu, he shouted, pointing. Naksha unk pas hai.
But Khalid was locked in a furious grapple, his strength waning against the guards who piled onto him. Hamza darted forward, desperate to snatch the map back, but a guard's rough arm blocked him, shoving him hard to the ground. Dust filled his mouth as he coughed, tears of frustration burning his eyes. Aisha crawled to his side, whispering urgently.
Hamza, hum dano kuch nahi kar pain jubi. Hum koi or tarika sak nahaga. Rahman straightened his collar, sneering down at Khalid, who was now restrained by two men. Deka? Tum surf ek tuta hua admi ho. Kal sabki samni tumhuri asli surath samni aagi. Or uski bad tum surf ek yad rajayoj bednami ki.
Khalid's chest heaved, but his eyes burned with defiance.
Or kal tumbi sabki samni apni asal surath dik doj. Gatter ki. Rahman's smile didn't waver.
He raised his hand and barked, in Dano Bashon ko o bandu.
Kal suba conference kabad, moody unka bi faisla karna hai.
Hamza's stomach dropped as two guards advanced, ropes in their hands. He clutched Aisha's hand tightly, whispering, Main tum kuch hon nahi dunga. But even as he said it, fear clawed at his chest. They were trapped, outnumbered, and the only hope, the map, was slipping farther from their reach. The tall man in the gray coat, the one with the map now hidden in his pocket, turned away silently, already making his own plans. His shadow stretched long across the hangar floor, and Hamza shivered. For the first time, he realized Rahman might not be the only enemy. The ropes bit into Hamza's wrists, coarse and rough, making his skin burn as the guards pulled tighter. Aisha sat beside him, her hands bound as well, her lips pressed together to stop them from trembling. The two were shoved into a dim corner of the hangar, far from Khalid, who was still held down by two armed men. Rahman paced the floor like a man already victorious, his shoes echoing against the concrete. He didn't even glance at the children anymore. To him, they were insignificant pawns. But Hamza's eyes never left the tall man in the gray coat. The stranger moved like a shadow, silent, always observing, never fully a part of Rahman's group yet never opposing either. And most importantly, he now had the map.
Hamza's thoughts raced. Who was he? Why had he hidden the map in his pocket instead of giving it to Rahman?
The man leaned against a pillar, pulling out a cigarette but never lighting it, his sharp eyes scanning the room as though calculating something no one else could see.
Hamza whispered to Aisha, his voice low. Wo admi, aski pas naksha hai. Aisha followed his gaze. Liken us Rahman ko nahi dia. Shayat uski apni plans hain. Hamza tugged against the ropes, wincing as they cut deeper. Moody usi wo naksha wapas lina haga. Warna abu barbad hojayanj.
Aisha leaned closer, whispering fiercely.
Hamza, hum banda hu hain. Agar tum zayada jald batsi ki to dano fans jayanj. But Hamza's heart pounded with urgency.
Every second that passed brought them closer to morning, closer to Rahman's conference, the moment his father's name would be dragged into the mud. Across the hangar, Khalid suddenly shouted, his voice raw.
Hamza! Mary Taraf Deko!
Hamza snapped his head toward him. His father's eyes were blazing with something between desperation and love. Yad Rocco, Beta, Khalid shouted, straining against the guards.
Himat Kavi Mat Kona. Danaya Kasabspade Jungbi Surfek Kadamase Jidi Jadi Hai.
His words cut through Hamza's fear like a blade, planting fire in his chest. A guard struck Khalid across the face to silence him, but Khalid didn't flinch. His eyes never left Hamza's.
Much Barossa Karo.
Rahman turned sharply, snarling.
Bas. Ya Natak band Karo. But the damage was done. Hamza's heart no longer raced with fear alone, it throbbed with resolve.
He leaned toward Aisha.
Mudiyak plan suj rahahai. She blinked. Kia? Hamza glanced at the guards. They were watching Khalid now, not the children.
Slowly, he began rubbing the rope against a jagged edge of a rusted metal box behind him. Each stroke frayed the fibers a little more.
He whispered, Jab main signal dun, hum dano bogkar USS admi kupas jayanj. Moody yakin hayuski pas sach hai. Aisha's eyes widened. Wo dangerous hai, Hamza. Hamza nodded. Liken or koi rastanahi. Minutes stretched like hours.
Rahman barked orders to his men, preparing files and crates, while Khalid was dragged into a smaller room.
The hangar dimmed as lights flickered, running on weak generators.
The gray-coated man moved closer to the exit, as though ready to slip away unnoticed.
Hamza's pulse surged. Now or never.
With one final tug, the rope around his wrists snapped loose. He shot a quick glance at Aisha, who was still bound, and hurriedly bent to free her as well. Her eyes shone with both fear and trust.
Hamza, he squeezed her hand. Tayyar? She nodded. He drew a sharp breath. Ub. They sprang to their feet, sprinting across the hangar. Shouts erupted instantly. Bakche bag rahi hain.
Guards lunged forward, but Hamza and Aisha weaved through scattered crates, knocking over a pile of metal rods that clattered loudly, slowing their pursuers. The tall man in the gray coat turned, his expression flickering with surprise as the children barreled toward him.
For a second, Hamza thought he saw something almost human in those eyes, amusement, maybe even respect.
Hamza skidded to a stop in front of him, chest heaving.
Wo naksha, apki pas hai. Humian dijai. Please.
The man studied him quietly, his face unreadable. Behind them, guards closed in, Rahman shouting furiously, Pakdo unhain.
The man raised an eyebrow. Tum like to hai main ek kagas ka tukta tum didunga? Tum janti bi hoya naksha kia hai? Hamza's voice cracked. Yes, surf kagaz nahi. Yamir abu ki is it high? For the first time, the man's lips twitched into the faintest smile. He slipped his hand into his coat pocket and pulled out the crumpled map. The guards were almost upon them. Hamza reached out desperately, his fingertips brushing the paper. But instead of handing it over, the man crouched down, his sharp eyes locking onto Hamza's. In a low voice, almost a whisper, he said, Egar tumyeche, to sabat karo katumwaki khalid kabeta ho. And with that, he stuffed the map back into his pocket, stood, and walked calmly toward the hangar's back door, ignoring the chaos exploding around him. Guards stormed past, but none dared stop him. Hamza's breath caught, fury and confusion crashing together. Ruko, he shouted, chasing after him. Aisha grabbed his arm, gasping, Hamza. Nahi. Ya jald batsi hai. But Hamza tore free. Moody usi milna haga. He sprinted after the tall man into the night, the sound of Rahman's enraged shouts echoing behind. The air outside was sharp and cold. The tall man moved swiftly across the empty airfield, his coat billowing like a shadow. Hamza ran with everything he had, his legs burning, his chest aching. Finally, the man stopped at the base of the broken control tower, turning to face him. The moonlight cut across his face, revealing scars Hamza hadn't noticed before, lines carved deep into his skin, as though his past had been full of battles too dark to name. Tumhuri himat buri nahi, he said quietly. Lekin himat hai coffee nahi hodi. Sakchai ko samajna bi zarori hai. Hamza panted, his fists clenched. To moody samjhao. Aap kaun ho? Or mir abu kasaf kia kale rahi ho? The man's eyes glinted in the dark. Tumher abu surf soldier nahi. Unhonek asi cheese deki hai joegar denaya ko patachalgai, to sab kuch badal jaega. Or main decide karunga ko wosech samniaya hamesha kuliya dabadia jay. Hamza's heart pounded, his mouth dry. Or wo naksha. The man pulled it out again, holding it between two fingers, letting the moonlight catch its faded lines. Ya naksha tumher abu ka imtihan hai. Final test. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Kal suba tumher abu ko faisla karna haga, or tumbi. Before Hamza could ask more, headlights flared across the airfield. Rahman's men had followed. The tall man tucked the map back into his coat and stepped into the shadows of the tower. Kal, Hamza. Sabkuch Kal decide haga. And with that, he vanished into the darkness as Rahman's jeep screeched to a halt, their engines roaring. Hamza's chest tightened. The final test was coming, and he wasn't ready. The night was alive with engines. Dust swirled across the empty airfield as Rahman's jeeps fanned out in a wide arc, their headlights slicing through the dark like white-hot blades. Hamza froze in the glare, his small body outlined against the concrete. The sudden screech of brakes, the slamming of doors, the pounding of boots, it all hit him like a tidal wave of fear. Wahan hai! Pakdo Usko, a guard shouted, his rifle raised. Hamza's heart lurched into his throat. He turned and ran, legs pumping with all the desperation in his veins. The vast field stretched endlessly, each breath burning his chest, but the roar of men chasing behind fueled his sprint. His mind screamed only one thing: survive. He darted toward the broken control tower where the tall man had disappeared, but when he looked up, there was nothing. No figure, no shadow, just silence. The mysterious man had melted into the darkness as if he were never there. And now Hamza was alone. A gunshot cracked, the bullet sparking off the concrete near his foot. He stumbled, but somehow kept running, diving behind a stack of old oil drums. His heart thundered. He could hear boots pounding closer, voices echoing, "Yuthe Awasi! Zinda Chahi!" Hamza pressed himself against the rusted metal, his breath ragged. He thought of his father, bound inside the hangar, helpless. He thought of Aisha, who must have been dragged back by now. His fists clenched. He couldn't let it end like this. He peered around the corner just as one guard split from the group, his flashlight beam sweeping dangerously close. Hamza ducked low, crawling through the shadows toward a ladder bolted to the control tower wall. His fingers trembled as he gripped the cold rungs, climbing fast. Below, voices shouted again. "Idhar High! Tower P Chad Raha High!" A spotlight flared upward, blinding him, but he forced himself higher, teeth gritted. The metal creaked under his weight, but finally, he reached the shattered window of the tower's control room. He hauled himself inside and collapsed, panting. Dust coated everything. Broken glass crunched under his knees. The room smelled of rust and old fuel, and in the middle of it lay a broken radio, wires dangling like veins. Hamza staggered toward it. His fingers brushed the cracked microphone. Could it still work? Could he somehow send a message? He twisted knobs, slammed buttons, his breath catching as static hissed faintly through the speakers. For a brief second, hope lit his chest until the static died again. Dead. Completely dead. "Nahi," he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. Heavy footsteps echoed below. The guards were climbing after him. He had minutes, maybe seconds. His eyes darted around the room, frantic, until they landed on something half buried under a tarp. He pulled it free and gasped. It was an old logbook, its pages yellowed, the cover marked with the Air Force insignia. His hands shook as he flipped it open. Inside were handwritten notes, sketches of flight paths, and reports signed by Khalid. His father's handwriting filled the pages, steady and strong. Hamza's throat tightened. These weren't lies. They were records of missions, of sacrifices, of truths never told. And on the last page, scrawled in hurried ink, was a sentence that made his heart stop: "If something happens to me, the truth is hidden in the final test location. My son will understand." Tears blurred Hamza's vision. His father had left this behind for him. Suddenly, the sound of boots reached the door below. They were coming. Hamza clutched the logbook to his chest, backing toward the shattered window. The drop outside was dizzying, the ground far below. He looked down. Guards swarmed like ants at the base of the tower, their rifles glinting. Escape seemed impossible. But then, there was movement in the distance. A small shadow darted between crates near the hangar, almost too fast to notice. Hamza squinted. His heart leapt. Aisha. She had slipped free somehow, crawling through the chaos. Her hands cupped around her mouth, and though faint, Hamza heard her voice carried on the wind, "Hamza. Jump." He froze, disbelief flooding him. Jump? From here? He'd break his legs, or worse. But the guards were seconds away from breaking the door. His pulse raced. Below, Aisha frantically rolled out an old tarpaulin and spread it across a pile of sandbags. She looked up again, her voice fierce despite her small frame. "Trust me. Jaldi." Hamza's mind spun. Trust. The word echoed, Khalid's voice thundering in his memory, much Barossa Karo. He closed his eyes, tightened his grip on the logbook, and whispered, "Abu, please." The door above burst open, splinters flying. Shouts filled the room. Pacto Osco.
Hamza ran, his feet slamming against the floor, and leapt out of the window into the night air.
For a moment, the world held still.
The ground rushed up. His stomach lurched.
Then impact. He crashed onto the tarpaulin, the sandbags breaking his fall.
Pain shot through his side, but he was alive.
Alive! Aisha grabbed his arm, dragging him to his feet.
Chalo!
Jaldi! Guards poured out of the tower, shouting furiously. Gunshots split the air.
Bullets whizzed past as the children sprinted through the shadows. Hamza clutched the logbook tight against his chest, every muscle screaming, every breath fire. They didn't stop until they reached the back fence of the airfield, crawling through a hole barely big enough. On the other side, Hamza collapsed, gasping. Aisha knelt beside him, her face streaked with dirt but her eyes shining.
Tum thiek ho?
He nodded, lifting the logbook weakly.
Main yaluaya. Abu Kasabut. Aisha stared, realization dawning. Yeah, sab kuch badal sakta hai. Hamza's eyes burned with both fear and determination. Han. Lekin Kal Suba, Conference Main. Tabhai Sach Samni Iega.
A cold wind swept across the night, carrying the distant shouts of Rahman's men. The children huddled together, exhausted but unbroken. The final test loomed closer than ever. And neither of them knew. The tall man in the gray coat was watching from the shadows, his eyes fixed on the logbook in Hamza's hands, a strange smile curling his lips. Inside the hangar, the night dragged on like a noose tightening around Khalid's throat. His arms were bound to a metal chair, his face bruised from earlier blows, but his eyes remained defiant. Rahman stood a few feet away, pacing slowly, his leather gloves creaking as he tightened them.
Around them, guards milled about, restless after losing the children.
The air was thick with frustration and rage. Moody Bateo, Rahman, Khalid finally said, his voice hoarse but steady.
Tumit Nikayan Dart Ho Mujs? Agar Main Waki Gatter Hoda, To Tumhinat Nishor Machine Ki Zerorat Haina Hodi.
Rahman stopped pacing, his lips curling into a bitter smile.
Dar? Main Tumzi Darta Hoon?
He leaned close, his face inches from Khalid's.
Main Tumhine Maitain Wala Hoon. Or Sapki Samni Tumhuri is it Ko Midi Main Malanga? Us Dinasi Badi Kushi or Kia Hogi merely ye? Khalid's jaw tightened, but he forced a calm smile. Tum Mui Mita Nahi Sakt. Sach Ko Kab Tak Chupog? Jis Din Sach Baharaya, Tumhuri Asal Surath Sabko Nazar Aegi.
Rahman laughed, the sound cold and sharp.
Sach? Tum like to hai Sach Ki Parwa Kasiko Hai? Log surf wohi monte hain jo unk samni ruka jada hai. Kal suba main unk samni tumhuri parani gulti and daikakar tum gatter sabat kar dunga. Or fur, tum surf ekyad ra jayoj. He pulled a file from the table and threw it into Khalid's lap. Dako. Ya sabut hain tumhuri nakami ku. Reports, tasvirain, witness statements. Harak laughs tumhuri barbadi likta hai. Khalid glanced down at the file.
Yes, the papers were damning, but he knew many were forged, twisted versions of the truth. His fingers trembled, not from fear but from rage. He lifted his gaze.
Tum juthi kahani banate raho, Rahman. Lekin yad rakna, mir bakche ubi zinda hain. Or unka hasla tumzi zayada mazbut hai. Rahman's eyes narrowed. Han, wo dano. Moody likta the tum apni family ki fikra hai. Lekin tum apni stubbornness esse unhain bi katra main daldia. Socho zara, agar wo mir hoth like gato?
Khalid's blood ran cold, but he refused to show fear. He leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous.
Agar tum mir bachchin ko krichbi kia, to tum kat apni jan ki kasam kani padejai.
For the first time, Rahman's smile faltered. He straightened, snapping at the guards, conference ki tayari karo. Kal tak ya admi tadna chahi. Use buka rako, use Jane nadu. Mui surfek thaka hua, tut chuka chera chahi suba. The guards obeyed, leaving Khalid in the dim light of a single hanging bulb.
Alone now, Khalid closed his eyes, drawing in a shaky breath. He thought of Hamza, his bright eyes, his stubborn courage. Beta Hagar Tumya Pad Pe Jo Main Chota the Totum Samaj Jaoch Kasachkia Hai. Bas Himat Banai Rakna.
Meanwhile, far from the hangar, Hamza and Aisha crouched inside an abandoned shed on the outskirts of the airfield.
The logbook lay open between them, its pages trembling in the faint breeze. Hamza traced his fingers over his father's handwriting.
Deko, he whispered, pointing to the last page.
Yawati final test wali jaga hai. Abu ni sab kuch wahanda. Aisha frowned. Lekin Kal conference asi peli hum wahan kais pahunch payinj? Roman kulog har jaga hain. Hamza's eyes burned with determination. Humian koi rasta nikalna haga. Egar hum yesabut same par nahi daike, to abu barbad hojainj. Aisha bit her lip. Or Agar hum fans gay to? Hamari zindagi bi katra main hai, Hamza.
He looked at her, his voice softening.
Aisha, abuani hamesha sach kuli iladai lady hai. Agar hum dar kapiche chup rati to wo kabi jeed nahi payenj. Moody abu p barosa hai, or tumpi.
Her eyes welled up, but she nodded.
Theek hai. Tochelo kl suba ese peli wahan kultine hain.
They studied the map and the logbook. The location circled twice was a derelict hangar at the far end of the base, long abandoned after a fire years ago.
The words written faintly below it made Hamza shiver. Truth rests here. Hamza closed the logbook firmly. Yahi hamari manzil hai. The night crawled by. Neither of them slept, their nerves stretched tight as a bowstring.
At dawn, faint light crept across the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gray. From a distance, they could hear the rumble of trucks, the bark of orders, Rahman's men preparing for the conference. The time had come. Hamza slung the logbook under his shirt, holding it close to his chest.
Aisha took his hand, squeezing hard. Tayyar? He nodded.
Together, they slipped into the shadows, moving toward the abandoned hangar marked on the map. As they crept closer, the air grew eerily still. The hangar loomed like a ghost, its roof half collapsed, the walls blackened with old smoke. Weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete, and broken glass glittered faintly in the morning light. Hamza pushed the creaking door open, and dust swirled around them.
Inside, the silence was suffocating.
Rows of burnt machinery lay scattered, and the smell of charred wood still lingered. But in the center of the hangar stood something unexpected, a locked metal trunk, its surface scorched but intact.
Hamza's pulse quickened. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside it.
The lock was rusted, but still strong.
Aisha crouched beside him. Kia ya wahi hai jaim sache hai?
Hamza nodded, his hands shaking.
Abu nikaha the final test. Shayad ya hai hai.
Before they could try breaking the lock, a voice echoed from the shadows, Tum dano ki himat dekni layak hai. Hamza spun around, his heart stopping.
From the far corner of the hangar, the tall man in the gray coat emerged, his face half hidden by the dim light.
He stepped forward slowly, his shoes crunching on broken glass.
Main kahadana, kl tum faisla karna haga. Aisha gasped, clutching Hamza's arm. Whoa, Yahan Kais? Hamza's throat went dry. AAP Kaun Hain? Abu Kadastya Dushman? The man stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. Main surf Sachka Rakwala Hun. Tumher Abuani Jo Kia, Jo Chapea, Uska Faisla Surf Tum Kar Sakt Ho. Yetrunk, Uski Andar Hiwo Sab Jo Tumher Abuki Is it Banayega Yatad Dega? Hamza stared at the trunk, then at the man. Aap Kia Kana Chatho? The man's voice dropped, heavy with weight. Tum decide Karna Haga, Hamza. Kia tum sachko danaya kasamni lane kuli yatayarho even if it changes everything you think you know about your father? Hamza's breath hitched.
His palms went clammy as the words sank in.
Everything? Could it be that the trunk didn't just hold proof of Khalid's innocence, but something darker? Aisha whispered, Hamza, yes sab kuch badal sakta hai. Hamza's heart pounded so hard it hurt.
He reached for the trunk, his fingers brushing the cold metal. The lock stared back at him like a challenge. His father's voice echoed in his head, Beta, himat kabi mat kona. With trembling hands, he pulled. The lock groaned but didn't break. The tall man watched silently, his eyes like a hawk's, as though judging Hamza's every move. At that moment, heavy footsteps thundered outside. The creak of weapons being loaded filled the air. Rahman's men. They had found them. Hamza's head snapped toward the door, panic crashing over him. The tall man's lips curved into the faintest smile. Faisla tumher samni hai, back. Abdeko, tum kitni himat rakti ho. And as the door slammed open, sunlight pouring in behind a line of armed guards, Hamza's hand clenched tight around the trunk's lock, caught between truth, fear, and the weight of his father's honor. The heavy boots thundered across the floor as Rahman's men poured into the abandoned hangar, rifles raised, voices echoing like thunder. Dust rained down from the rafters. Hamza froze over the trunk, his small hands still gripping the rusty lock, his breath ragged. Aisha pressed close to him, her wide eyes flicking from the soldiers to the tall man in the gray coat, who hadn't moved an inch. He simply stood there, his coat swaying lightly, his eyes cold and observant as if this chaos were nothing more than a test. Rahman entered last, his silhouette framed by the rising sun. His polished shoes clicked against the concrete, his expression triumphant. Moody Maloon the Tum Yahan Aoj, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Bakche ho, like an apni bapki terazidi. Deka? Tummir samni for a high gay. Hamza swallowed hard, his knuckles white on the trunk. Rahman, he shouted, his voice cracking but filled with fire. Ya sabud haiko abu gadar nahi. Ormania sabki sami lujonga. Rahman's laughter was harsh, echoing against the burned walls. Sabut? Bakche, tum like to high main tum zinda yahanase jane duna? Tum samaj nahi ada? Mir pas power high. Mir pas system high. Tum hair pas surfak purana box high. The guards closed in, their rifles aimed. Aisha trembled, whispering to Hamza, Hum kia karenj? Hum dano bias bakche hain. Hamza's chest burned. He wanted to be brave, but fear clutched at his ribs. The trunk's lock cut into his palms. He looked at the tall man desperately. Aap kuch kayan nahi kar rahi? Apan kaha the final test high. The man's face remained unreadable. Test tab high pas hoda high jab tum cut apni takat samaj jo. Main tum rasta nahi daikonga. Tum kud nikelna hoga. Rahman's patience snapped. Enough. Pacto unhain. Two guards rushed forward. Hamza's heart pounded so loud it deafened him. In a surge of desperation, he slammed the lock against the concrete floor. Once, twice, the sound rang out, metal groaning. The lock cracked slightly but held on. The guards closed in. He raised it again, his arms shaking. With a final cry, he smashed it down. The lock snapped open with a sharp clang. The trunk's lid creaked as Hamza threw it open. Dust swirled in the air. Inside lay a stack of thick folders, sealed envelopes, and a small black box with the Air Force insignia. Hamza's hands fumbled, pulling out the top folder. He flipped it open and gasped. Photographs. Reports. Official documents. They told a story completely different from Rahman's lies. Missions Khalid had flown, lives he had saved, risks he had taken. There were witness testimonies signed by soldiers who had survived because of him. And at the very bottom, Hamza's fingers trembled as he lifted it, was a letter, handwritten by Khalid himself. Hamza's lips moved as he read aloud, his voice breaking, Igarya files kabi samni ayan, toiska matlab hi main apnakam pore nahi karpaya. Lekanjoya pad rahai, yad rakna, main apni zindagi apni mulk kaliya di hai, or main kabi gadar nahida. Sakchai kuliya ladna hamesha mushkil hoda hai, lekan wodi ekasli imtihan hai. The hangar fell silent. Even the guards hesitated, their eyes flicking uncertainly. Rahman's face darkened with rage. Juth. Ya sab banawati hai.
Ya files purain hain, jishi keobi likwe ja sakta hai.
But the tall man finally stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying weight.
Ya asli hain. All eyes turned to him.
He held up one of the documents, his gaze locking on Rahman.
Main witness hoon. Manus whacked in operations ka hissa the. Gasps rippled through the room. The guards looked at one another uneasily. Rahman's face twisted, but his voice shook with fury. Tumhari himat kai's hui. The tall man cut him off coldly.
Main chup raha kyunki whacked nahi the.
Lekin ya bacha, isni himat dike. Ab main biapna fars nibhonga. Kal conference main gawahi duna ko khalid sacha the.
Hamza's chest swelled with hope, his eyes stinging with tears.
Finally, they had someone on their side. But Rahman's fury was far from over.
His voice roared through the hangar.
No! Tum sabko like to hayek purana paper or ek dokbes gaatum bacha liga? Main kl suba sabki samni isa sabut dakwangva kukoi tumhari bat pi yakin nahi karega.
He snapped his fingers. The guards raised their rifles again.
Hamza instinctively clutched the logbook and the files to his chest, shielding them with his body.
Aisha gripped his shoulder, whispering, Hamza, hum fans gay. The tall man stepped in front of them, his coat shifting as though he had prepared for this very moment. His voice was low, dangerous. Rahman, Agar tumnin bakin ko haflagaya, to tum samaj lina tumhari game katum. The guards hesitated. Rahman's teeth clenched. For a moment, the air was a knife's edge. Then, slowly, Rahman lowered his hand, signaling the men to step back. His smile returned, sharp and venomous.
Theek hai. Tum sabko like to hai tum jeet liya? Kal suba sabki samni faisla haga. Dekt hain kaun bachiga khalid kanam.
He turned sharply, storming out of the hangar, his men following, though unease lingered in their steps.
The heavy doors slammed shut, leaving silence in their wake.
Hamza's shoulders sagged, but his heart still raced. He looked up at the tall man, his voice barely a whisper.
Kia hum, jeet liya?
The man's eyes gleamed, unreadable as ever.
Jeet tab hogi jab sach danaya kasami kata haga. Kal, kl tumhari zindagi kasabs bada imtihan hai.
And as the dawn light poured through the shattered roof, Hamza realized tomorrow would not just decide his father's honor, it would decide everything. Outside, unseen by them, Rahman stood by his jeep, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was sharp, dripping with venom.
Plan Badal do. Conference Kopeli, Khalid or Uski Bakin Ko Kadam Kardu. Moody Surfik Chera Chahi Kl Mera.
The morning of the conference arrived with a heavy stillness in the air, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Flags fluttered weakly against the pale light, soldiers lined the airbase, and a long red carpet stretched across the tarmac toward a grand white tent set up for the event. Officials, officers, and media teams bustled about, their voices sharp, their cameras clicking. To the world, it was just another ceremony, another patriotic speech. But for Hamza and Aisha, it was the battlefield where truth and lies would collide. Inside a small, dimly lit storage shed near the airstrip, Hamza clutched the logbook and the files they had recovered from the trunk. His heart pounded in his chest, his palms damp. Aisha was beside him, adjusting her scarf nervously, whispering, Hamza, tum like to hai ya coffee haga? Agar unhon humian conference tak pahanjan hai nahi diato? Hamza's eyes burned with determination, though fear gnawed at him. Abu kuliya, humian pahanchna hai haga. Hamar pas sabut hai, or wo adni, he glanced at the tall man in the grey coat, who stood in the shadows silently, usnwada kia hai gawahi din ka. The tall man's voice was calm, but heavy. Rahman apni puri takat laga dega tum rakne kuliya. Ust already apna plan bana liya hai. Tum dano ko samajna haga, har kadam mautkat imtihan hai. Aisha's breath caught. To hum kia carrion? The man looked at Hamza with piercing eyes. Tumher pas surfak advantage hai sach. Lekin sach ko same pardaikana haga. Agar tumek minute be late hu, sabkatam. Hamza nodded, clutching the documents tighter. His father's words echoed in his mind, Himat Kabi Matkona, Beta.
But outside, Rahman was already tightening his net.
In his temporary command tent, he stood before a group of loyal men. His voice was sharp, deadly.
Wo dano bakche or wo ga conference tak nahi pahanshahi. Sab kuch tayar hai?
One of his men nodded.
Geez, sir. Gate kapas checkpoint lagaya gaya hai. Agar wo wahane, wo hi kadam kar denga. Dusra plan be ready hai agar wo ten kapaspie, sniper tayar hai. Rahman's lips curved into a cruel smile. Perfect. Khalid ko main stage partadunga, or uski apni bak kabi sach dikain ka chance hai nahi pange.
The sound of jets flying overhead rumbled through the sky, drowning his laughter.
Back in the shed, Hamza peeked through a crack in the wooden wall.
He could see the crowd gathering in front of the grand tent. Officers in their uniforms stood tall, journalists adjusted their cameras, and in the center, a stage gleamed with microphones waiting for Rahman's speech.
His throat went dry. Basek mauka chahi. Surfek mauka sabki samni jain ka.
But just as he turned back, the tall man stiffened, his eyes narrowing.
Hamza. Aisha, wakt aa gaya. Rahman ko admi tumhuri taraf aa rahi hain. Hamza's stomach dropped. Matlab. Matlab tum dano abi nikal jayo. Main unhain rokan ga. Aisha panicked. Aap akele? Wo to dustus admi hain. The man's jaw tightened. Tum samaj nahi rahi.
Agar tum yahan rukge, to sabut kabi conference tak nahi pahanchenj.
Tum baagna haga.
Hamza grabbed Aisha's hand, his heart racing. Chalo. They pushed open the back door of the shed just as heavy footsteps thundered at the front. The tall man stepped forward, blocking the entrance, his voice cold, Tum log yahan taka ho, lekanage nahi jaa sokt. The sound of fists meeting flesh, grunts, and the crash of wooden crates exploded behind them as Hamza and Aisha ran. The sun was high now, casting long shadows across the base.
Hamza darted between parked vehicles, pulling Aisha along, their breaths ragged, their hearts thundering.
Every corner seemed to hide danger, every shout made them flinch.
At the first checkpoint near the tent, 2 guards spotted them. Ruko, they shouted, raising their rifles.
Hamza froze, but then a sudden burst of commotion erupted on the other side as a group of journalists pushed through, waving press passes, shouting about getting better angles. In the chaos, Hamza pulled Aisha low, ducking under the barricade. They slipped through unnoticed, their small bodies lost in the crowd.
They were inside. The tent loomed just ahead.
The stage gleamed under the harsh light. And there, Hamza's eyes widened, stood his father. Khalid was brought to the stage in chains, 2 soldiers on either side. His face was pale, bruised, but his back was straight, his eyes unbroken.
The crowd murmured, shocked to see the once respected officer bound like a criminal. Hamza's throat tightened. Abu. Rahman stepped onto the stage next, his uniform pristine, his smile sharp as a blade.
He raised his hands for silence. The murmurs died down. Mir Dostan, he began, his voice booming.
Aaj hum sab yahan ek dokbase ko binikab karne hain. Ek admi jo apni mulk kuliya nahi, dushman kuliya lartaraha. Ek admi jiska naam hai.
Khalid. The crowd gasped.
Cameras clicked furiously.
Khalid stood silent, his jaw clenched.
Hamza felt his chest explode with rage.
He clutched the logbook tighter.
Wo juth bol raha hai. Humi and sapki samni sech dikana haga. Aisha grabbed his arm.
Lekin Hamza, Dako, she pointed discreetly to the rooftop of a nearby building. Through the glare of the sun, a faint glint caught her eye.
A sniper rifle.
Her blood ran cold.
Hamza, wo humi and dek rahi hain. Agar hum stage ki taraf gay, wo goli chala dinga. Hamza's heart stuttered.
He looked at the files in his hand, then at his father on the stage, then at Rahman, who was weaving his lies smoothly into the crowd's ears. His entire body shook with the weight of the moment.
Abu kanam bakana hai, par agar main abi agege to hamdano mar dijanj. The tall man's words echoed in his mind. Final test tumher liyeya haika tum sachkoa whacked par dikain ki himat rako. Hamza clenched his teeth, his eyes locked on the stage. He whispered, Kia hum chup rahenge, yasab kuch dov par lagadinga? The crowd erupted in cheers as Rahman lifted a folder high, declaring, Ya hai asli sabut, khalid ki gadari. Cameras zoomed in. All eyes were on him. Hamza's hand shook violently as he pulled the logbook from his shirt, clutching it against his chest. His heart pounded louder than the applause. The decision loomed over him like a blade. If he spoke now, he would become the target. If he stayed silent, his father would be destroyed. Hamza took a trembling breath, his lips parting. And then, a sharp crack echoed from the rooftop. Aisha screamed. The world seemed to freeze as Hamza felt something whistle past his ear, close enough to burn his skin. The sniper had fired. The sniper's crack split the air like lightning. The crowd screamed, chaos exploding inside the grand tent. Soldiers shouted, journalists ducked, cameras clattered to the floor. Hamza stumbled, clutching Aisha, his heart hammering as the bullet missed his head by inches and tore through a banner behind him. Dust and shreds of cloth rained down. On the stage, Khalid's blood froze. His eyes locked instantly on the small figures in the crowd, his son clutching the logbook, his daughter trembling beside him. For a heartbeat, the chains binding his wrists meant nothing. His voice thundered over the chaos, raw and desperate, Hamza. Aisha. Juk Jayo. Hamza's breath came ragged, his ears ringing, but hearing his father's voice gave him strength. He pulled Aisha down behind the barricade, their bodies pressed against the cold metal as panicked people shoved past them. Rahman, however, raised his hands, his voice booming even in the madness. Deka? Ya goli. Ya sab proof high. Ya bakche bi khalid kusath hain unk pasgatari kasabut high. Wo hamar conference ko tadna chad hain. Some of the crowd, confused and terrified, began to believe him. Shouts rippled, Pakdo un hain. Wo Khalid ko bakche hain. Khalid's rage boiled over. He stepped forward, straining against his chains, his voice sharp as steel. Ya juth hai. Mir bakche sach kuliye hain, naka jishi gadari kuliyet. His words struck like a whip, silencing a few of the whispers. His eyes never left Hamza. Beta, himat mat kona. Sach ko samni lana hai tumhara fars hai. But Rahman snapped at his men, his face twisted with fury. Sniper. Dusri goli. Kadam kar du. Up on the rooftop, the sniper adjusted his aim, the scope glinting dangerously in the sunlight. His finger tightened on the trigger. Hamza's world narrowed to that single glint of metal. His heart stopped. Then, suddenly, another shot rang out. But this one came from somewhere else. The sniper jolted, his rifle clattering to the rooftop as he fell back, struck in the shoulder. Gasps erupted. Hamza's head whipped around. There, standing at the edge of the crowd, the tall man in the gray coat lowered a pistol, smoke curling from its barrel. His calm voice cut through the chaos, Unbatchin ko okoi hoth nahi lagaiga. The crowd roared with shock. Guards rushed toward him, but his cold stare and steady weapon froze them in their tracks. The air shifted, the lies wobbling, the truth clawing its way forward. Hamza felt fire ignite inside him. He leapt onto the barricade, raising the logbook high above his head. His small voice cracked but carried, fueled by desperation, Ya sabut hai kamir abu gadar nahi. Ya unki asli kahani hai. Ya documents dikate hain unhon kitni janan bache, kitni ladai jiti. Roman juth bol raha hai. The crowd gasped again, journalists snatching up cameras to capture the boy's trembling figure, his eyes blazing with conviction. Aisha clutched his arm, terrified but unwilling to pull him down. Khalid's chest swelled with pride, his eyes stinging with tears as he whispered, Mara Beta. Roman's face twisted in rage. He barked orders furiously, Pakdo Asi. Abi. Sabut Chin Lo. Guards surged toward Hamza, but the crowd hesitated. Some officers in the audience frowned, whispering to one another. A colonel in the front row stood up sharply, his voice firm. Roko. Peli de koya bakchakia daikana chata hai.
The crowd murmured in agreement. The guards faltered, unsure.
Roman's fury deepened, his eyes flashing like fire. Tum sab mir orders ko khilaf jaa rahi ho? But Hamza didn't stop.
His trembling hands opened the logbook, flipping to the page where Khalid's handwriting glistened faintly. He read aloud, his voice breaking but strong.
Main apna har din apni mulk kuliya jia. Agar kabi meri wafadari pi sawalav, to meri files daikana. Ya meri zindagi ka sabut hai.
Main gadar nahi, main sapahi hun. The silence that followed was deafening.
Cameras zoomed in on the boy's tear-streaked face, on the trembling words in the logbook.
The whispers in the crowd grew louder, doubt creeping into their hearts.
Rahman knew he was losing control.
His desperation turned vicious. He lunged forward, snatching a pistol from a guard, his eyes wild.
Bas. Ya drama kata mabi. He aimed directly at Hamza. Aisha screamed. Khalid roared, straining against his chains with a strength born of pure fury. Metal clanged, veins bulged in his neck, his wrists bleeding as he pulled with everything he had. Hamza ah! And then, crash! The chains snapped.
Khalid staggered forward, his wrists raw but free, his eyes blazing like fire.
Gasps and shouts erupted from the crowd. Soldiers froze in disbelief. Rahman's finger tightened on the trigger.
Hamza's eyes widened, his body frozen in terror. Khalid launched himself from the stage, his roar splitting the air as he threw himself between Rahman and his son.
The gun fired. A single bullet tore through the chaos, its sound shattering the world into silence.
Hamza's scream ripped from his throat as the figure crumpled before him, his father's arms spread wide, shielding him.
Khalid fell to his knees, blood blossoming across his uniform.
His face twisted in pain, but his eyes, still fierce, still alive, locked on his son's. Beta, Sachko Okabi Matkona, his voice was a whisper, but it struck like thunder.
The crowd erupted into screams, journalists surging forward, guards clashing, the tall man firing again as chaos swallowed the tent.
Hamza knelt beside his father, clutching him desperately, his own voice breaking, Abu.
Abu. Nahi. But Khalid's hand, trembling and bloodied, pressed the logbook back into his son's chest.
His voice was fading, but his words carved themselves into Hamza's soul.
Tumhorila die high.
His head dipped, his breath shallow. And as the crowd roared, Rahman's face contorted in triumph and fury both, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air was thick with screams, gunfire echoes, and the metallic tang of blood. Khalid lay slumped in Hamza's arms, his uniform soaked crimson, his chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Hamza's own sobs tore from his throat as he clutched his father tighter, rocking slightly as if holding him could reverse the bullet's damage.
Abu, please, J. Hum apki bina nahi kar sakt.
Khalid's eyelids fluttered, his gaze still locked on his son, but words refused to form now. His hand, trembling, slid from Hamza's cheek and dropped weakly against the stage. The world around them spun into chaos, journalists shouting into cameras, soldiers arguing, officers frozen in shock. Yet, in Hamza's ears, there was only silence, except for his father's fading heartbeat against his arm. Rahman stood tall amidst the mayhem, his pistol still warm in his hand. His face bore a twisted mask of triumph.
He raised the weapon again, pointing at Hamza, his voice booming, Dekasaden? Ya Hayek Gadar Ki family. Or Ya Bakcha Khalid Ka Beta Sabud Lekar Biayada. Ya Sabunk Miln Ki Sazish Hai. Some gasps rang through the crowd, but others shook their heads, doubt already poisoning Rahman's narrative. Cameras zoomed in on Hamza, the boy trembling but still clutching the logbook to his chest as if it were his lifeline.
Khalid, bleeding and weak, forced a whisper, barely audible to Hamza, Beta Yabtum, Awaz Banu, his eyes closed, his body going limp. Hamza's world shattered. A cry ripped through his chest, raw and broken, echoing across the tent.
Nahi.
Something inside him shifted. The grief twisted into fire, burning away the fear that had chained him for so long. His tears streaked his face, but his jaw clenched, his small body trembling not with terror, but with a new resolve.
Slowly, he stood.
With shaking hands, he lifted the blood-stained logbook above his head. His voice cracked, but rang clear across the chaos.
Sab Suno. Ya Mera Abu Kalika Huasach Hai. Ya file sabut hain ka wo gatter nahi wo hero the. Wo apni molt kuliya lart rahi jabduser surf apni fade kuliya lartha.
The crowd fell into a tense hush. Officers shifted uneasily.
Journalists leaned forward, cameras flashing like lightning. Rahman's face darkened, his smile evaporating.
Hamza's voice grew stronger, fueled by the weight of his father's sacrifice.
Mir abuani mudiya kaibat sakaiti, kasach kaliya kata hona mushkil hoda hai, lekin wati saps bati jeet hodi hai. Or aaj main sach lekar yahan kata hun. Ya file sapko daika yenji kukaun gatter the orkaun wafadar.
He slammed the folder open onto the nearest podium, shoving the documents toward the cameras. Reporters swarmed instantly, lenses zooming on stamped signatures, official letters, mission records, all proving Khalid's loyalty, his bravery, his truth.
Murmurs rippled like waves. An officer muttered, Yatu asli papers lag rahi hain, another whispered, Rahman ni humi indoka dia the kia? Rahman's mask cracked.
Rage twisted his features.
Juth. Ya sab juth hai. Main kh rahahun ya bakcha sab banawati sabut lekar ayahai.
But before he could say more, the tall man in the gray coat stepped forward into the spotlight.
He raised his voice, sharp as a blade, Main gawahi dida hun. Main on missions ka hisada. Khalidini apni jan risk par dali ti hum sab kuliye. Yes, sabut asli hain.
The tent erupted in gasps.
Soldiers glanced at one another, uncertainty gnawing at Rahman's authority. Cameras swung toward the man, capturing his unwavering expression. Hamza felt his chest tighten.
For the first time, hope flickered amidst the grief. He shouted again, his small fists clenched, Ab aap sab faisla karian.
Kia aap asadmi ki bad maininj just apni power kaliya sabko dokadia?
Yas sapahi par yakin karenj just apni jan mulk kuliye dedi?
The crowd roared, split between confusion and awakening. Rahman's control was slipping like sand through his fingers. He snapped, desperation flaring.
He raised his pistol once more, aiming at Hamza with a trembling hand.
Tum mui challenge kia, back? Main tumhind be unk soth bej dunga. Aisha screamed, clutching Hamza's arm.
Soldiers in the front row froze, torn between loyalty to Rahman and the truth now staring them in the face.
Hamza stood tall, though his small body shook. His voice, surprisingly calm, cut through the madness. Agar muyimar kartum sach kao chapana chatho, to goli chaladu. Lekin yad rakna mera abu ka namab sapki dilan main amar hochuka hai. Tum goli ase sach ko okabi nahi mar sagt.
The words struck like lightning. The crowd erupted again, some cheering, some crying, some chanting Khalid's name. Shaheed Khalid! Shaheed Khalid! The chant grew louder, pounding like drums of war.
Rahman's face contorted with rage and fear.
His pistol wavered, sweat dripping down his temples.
He was losing everything, and he knew it.
Suddenly, from the edge of the tent, a group of soldiers stormed in, their uniforms bearing a different insignia.
Their leader barked, Rahman. Tum abi giraftar ho.
The crowd gasped.
Rahman whipped around, snarling, Kia? The soldiers advanced, weapons raised.
The officer leading them held up a signed order. Sarkar ko tumhuri chal pada chal gai.
Tumhuri investigation chal rahi hai. Aaj ka conference ko bad tum arrest karn ka order mila hai.
Tumub or nahi bol sagt. Rahman staggered back, his pistol dropping slightly.
His voice cracked, wild with desperation, Nahi? Ya sab meri menati. Ya mera control the.
Tum moody giraftar nahi karsakt. Hamza's chest heaved, his tears mixing with fire as he clutched his father's logbook tighter. He stepped down from the barricade slowly, his eyes never leaving Rahman's. The boy who had been mocked as a liar now stood as the voice of truth.
But Rahman wasn't done.
With a sudden snarl, he grabbed Aisha, yanking her close, pressing the cold barrel of his pistol against her temple. The crowd screamed in horror. Hamza froze, his heart crashing to the floor.
Aisha.
Rahman's voice was venom, his eyes wild.
Agar tonek kadambi age badhaya, tomain is ladki kakun kardunga. Moody rasta do. The soldiers halted, their weapons trembling.
The crowd gasped, terrified. Hamza's hands shook, his throat dry, his heart clawing in his chest. He had just raised his father's honor from ashes, now he stood on the brink of losing his sister. Rahman dragged Aisha backward toward the exit, his voice a roar of desperation.
Koimir rast main ayato main guli chula dunga. Muhi gadi do. Abi.
Aisha whimpered, her wide eyes locked on Hamza.
Bi ya.
Hamza's breath came shallow, his mind spinning. His father's voice echoed again in his soul, Beta, Abtumhuri Ladai Hai. And now, standing before the world, Hamza realized this was his moment. Either he saved his sister and finished Rahman's tyranny, or everything would collapse again. His small fists clenched. His eyes blazed through his tears.
He whispered under his breath, Abu, Mudi Himatu.
Then, louder, his voice carrying across the chaos, Rahman.
Agar tum like to high main chupkata rahunga, totum galat ho.
The entire tent held its breath, watching a boy face the man who had destroyed everything. The world inside the tent had shrunk into a single frozen moment.
Rahman's arm locked tightly around Aisha's neck, the pistol pressed against her temple.
Her terrified eyes darted around, landing finally on Hamza, silently begging him to save her.
The crowd had fallen utterly silent, cameras still rolling, soldiers frozen, reporters trembling but refusing to lower their lenses. Every second ticked like thunder in Hamza's ears.
Rahman's voice cut the silence, a mix of desperation and fury.
Gadi lao. Abi. Varna ye larki zinda nahi bachegi.
His voice cracked, and the grip on Aisha tightened, making her whimper.
Main sab kadam kar dunga. Samj tum log?
The officer with the arrest order stepped forward cautiously, his palms raised.
Rahman, Hosh main aao. Tum or ger del dal main dub jeoj. Hathiyar nache rako. Rahman spat, his eyes bloodshot. Chup raho. Tum sab moody doka deen whale ho. Main yahan se niklunga or sab kuch dobara apni hoth main luna. Hamza stood rooted to the spot, his chest heaving.
Inside, his fear screamed at him to stay back, but something stronger rose above it, the memory of his father's hand, weak yet firm, pressing the logbook into his palm.
Abtum awaz banu.
His small fists clenched. He stepped forward.
Rahman.
His voice rang out sharp, slicing through the thick air. Everyone turned toward him.
Mary behen koyo kodo. Rahman's lips twisted into a mocking smile. Or agar na kodu to? Tum kia kar loj, chot hero?
He pressed the barrel harder against Aisha's temple, making her gasp. Hamza's heart lurched, but he didn't falter.
Main wo karunga jo tum kabi sosha bi nahi haga. He lifted the blood-stained logbook high into the air, the cameras instantly focusing on it.
Ya sabut, absurf mir pas nahi hai.
Sab cameras ni isi record kar liya hai. Purai mulk ni sun liya hai kutum gatter ho.
Tum chati mui, Mary behen, yasabko mardu, sechko tum abkabi nati chupasakt. A murmur swept through the crowd, rippling like fire. Sach record ho gaya hai, the reporters' voices overlapped, sending the words beyond the tent to every television, every radio, every household.
Rahman's eyes widened in shock.
For the first time, his grip on Aisha faltered slightly. Rage replaced his fear, twisting his face.
Nahi. Main abibi sab kadam kar sakta hun. Ya cameras, ya log, ya bakche, sab merely ya kuchnani. Hamza's eyes flashed.
His voice steadied with icy calm. Lekin tumhuri zindagi absurf du rastpar hai, Rahman.
Ya to tum surrender karo, ya fur tumhura anjam yahin, sabki samni haga.
The soldiers tightened their aim, their fingers tense on triggers.
The officer barked, Rahman, showed dularki ko. Tomek mauka diaja raha hai. Rahman's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face. His eyes darted wildly, calculating, desperate. He hissed into Aisha's ear, "Aaj kudin ki wajah sitam sab barbad ho jayoch." Hamza's mind raced. He couldn't just wait, Rahman could snap any second. He looked down at the logbook in his hand, then back at Rahman. Suddenly, a memory flashed, Khalid teaching him how to distract an enemy during training exercises at home. Kabi kabi, jim kuliye tum unki sak tadni padi hai. Hamza's grip tightened on the logbook. His heart pounded so loudly he thought it might burst, but he knew what he had to do. He raised the logbook higher, shouting at the top of his lungs. Rahman! Agar tum meri behen ko kuchkia, tomania logbook og main jela dunga. Tum herez sabko malum hain, lekin asli papers surf mir pas hain. Tum chahi mudi mardu, lekin yesabut tum her khilaf hamesha zinda rahenj. The bluff crackled like lightning. The crowd gasped. Even Aisha's tear-streaked face flickered with shock. Rahman froze, his eyes locked on the logbook. His lips parted, trembling with fury. Nahi, tum ya nahi kar sakt. Hamza took a daring step closer, his hands trembling but his voice unshaken. Aaj faisla tum karna hai. Tumhuri azadi kuliya meri behen ki jan, ya tumhuri puri zindagi barbad hon kuliya tumhura sech sabki sami. Kia chad ho? Rahman's chest rose and fell like a caged beast, trapped between choices. His grip on Aisha loosened just enough for her to gasp a breath. The soldiers tensed, ready to leap. Hamza's heart hammered. He knew he had only seconds. Aisha, he shouted suddenly. Juko! Without thinking, Aisha ducked sharply, and Hamza hurled the logbook straight at Rahman's face. It struck his forehead with a thud, startling him. His pistol arm wavered. Abi, the officer barked. The soldiers surged forward. A gunshot exploded, deafening. Screams tore through the tent. Hamza's ears rang. He saw Rahman stumble backward, his pistol clattering to the floor. But the chaos was too blinding, smoke, shouts, people running. Then Hamza's blood ran cold. In the confusion, Rahman, instead of falling, had managed to shove Aisha to the ground and dart toward the side exit, clutching his bleeding forehead. Soldiers lunged, but he shoved through the crowd with shocking speed, disappearing into the night. Hamza dropped to his knees beside Aisha, pulling her close, his body trembling. She sobbed into his shoulder. Biya, muyilaga main marjangi. He held her tight, whispering fiercely, Main tum kuch nahi hondunga. But even as he comforted her, his eyes burned with fire. Rahman had escaped again. And this time, he wasn't just running. He was wounded, desperate, and more dangerous than ever. Hamza knew with every fiber of his being Rahman would come back. Stronger. Crazier. Deadlier. The soldiers swarmed the stage, helping Aisha to her feet and guarding Hamza. The officer approached, his face grim. Beta, tum bahaduri daikei hai. Lekin ya kail abi kadam nahi hua. Ramana borbi katarnak ho gaya hai. Hamza's fists clenched, his tear-streaked face hardened. Main asi kadam karunga. Abu ki kazam. The officer placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. For tayar ho jayo. Kyunkagli bar, wo surf tumher pishayega. Outside, in the darkness beyond the floodlights, Rahman staggered through the streets, his face twisted in pain and fury. Blood trickled down his temple, but his eyes burned like coals. Main latunga, Hamza, he muttered through gritted teeth. Or jab latunga, tumzi tumhuri rubichin lunga. The night swallowed his vow, carrying it like a curse into the silence. The days after the conference passed like a storm that refused to settle. News channels replayed the footage again and again, Hamza standing on the podium, his small fists clenched, his trembling voice shouting the truth to the world. Khalid's name now echoed across the nation, no longer as a traitor, but as a hero who had been wronged. People lit candles outside military bases. Newspapers printed bold headlines, Shaheed Khalid, a soldier's honor restored. But for Hamza, victory tasted bittersweet. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's blood pooling on the ground, his final whisper ringing in his ears,
beta, tumawaz banu, he carried that weight like armor. Yet beneath it, grief gnawed at him. At night, he woke gasping, clutching the logbook to his chest, whispering apologies to the father he couldn't save. Aisha, too, had changed. The laughter in her eyes was gone, replaced with shadows. She often sat by the window, staring out silently, as though expecting Rahman to appear at any moment. And Hamza knew she wasn't wrong, Rahman was still out there. The officer who had stood by them, Colonel Imran, visited their house often now. He became like a shield, posting guards outside and sending soldiers to patrol the neighborhood. One evening, he sat with Hamza in the quiet living room, the dim light casting heavy shadows across the walls. Beta, he said gravely, tum jo kia, usn pure molt karuk bataldia. Lekin Rahman jays admi, wo chup nahi baifta. Uski pas paisa hai, log hain, or sabs batibat, uski andar batal kiog hai. Hamza's fists clenched on his knees. Main tayar hoon. Abu kunam kuliye, main usi kadam karunga. Colonel Imran studied him. Tum abi bak che ho. Lekin tumhara dil sapahi ka hai. Agar tum waki ladna chadho, totum sikna haga. Tayari haga. Discipline haga. Warna Rahman tum tad dega. From that night, Hamza's life transformed. At dawn, when the call of the azan echoed, he was already awake, running laps under the watchful eye of Imran. He learned how to control his breath, how to read the silence, how to notice shadows others ignored. He practiced with sticks, learning defense moves, blocking and striking until his arms ached. Imran didn't go easy on him. Hamza, Yad Rako, he barked one morning as Hamza stumbled. Ladai main na bacha hoda hai na Buddha. Surf jean whale or harn whale od hain. Hamza gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes, and stood back up every time he fell. He wasn't just training his body, he was training his resolve. Aisha sometimes watched from the veranda, her worry etched deep, but also pride flickering in her gaze. One evening, when Hamza collapsed onto the ground, exhausted after hours of drills, she rushed to him with water. Bia, apni aapko at namatthakeo. Tum bas bacha ho. Hamza, panting, shook his head. Main bas bacha nahi hun, Aisha. Main abu ka beta hun. Muhi ya karna hai haga. His voice broke slightly, but the fire in his eyes didn't dim. Meanwhile, whispers of Rahman's whereabouts spread like smoke. Some claimed he had fled across the border, others that he was hiding in the mountains. But Hamza knew better. Rahman's last words haunted him, Main Latanga. And then, one night, the promise came true. It was raining heavily. Thunder cracked across the sky, and water drummed against the tin roofs. Hamza sat by the window, unable to sleep, the logbook resting in his lap. Aisha had finally dozed off beside their mother, their faces pale but calm in sleep. The guards outside huddled under umbrellas, their boots splashing in puddles. Hamza's eyes drifted shut, until a sound pierced through the storm. Not thunder. Not rain. A muffled thud. Then another. His eyes snapped open. He crept to the window. In the distance, through the curtain of rain, he saw shadows moving, too many, too organized. His stomach twisted. Then, a sharp crack of gunfire split the night. One guard dropped instantly. Shouts erupted outside. Hamla! Hamla! Hamza's blood turned to ice. Rahman had come. He rushed to Aisha, shaking her awake. Aisha! Utho! Jaldi! She stirred groggily, then froze as more gunshots rattled through the air. Their mother gasped, pulling them both close. The door burst open. Colonel Imran stormed in, rainwater dripping from his uniform, his pistol already drawn. Hamza! Rahman aa gaya hai. Tum dano ko shurachit nikalna haga. Aisha whimpered. Wo Yahan? Imran's jaw tightened. Han. Or uski pasad mi bihain. Lekin tum dano ko zinda rena haga. Samj? He pointed at Hamza. Beta, yad rako tumhari himat sabs badi talwar hai.
Darna mat. Hamza nodded, his small hands trembling but his eyes blazing. He grabbed the logbook and clutched it tight. The wall shook with another blast, this time a grenade exploding near the gate. Glass shattered, and screams echoed from outside. Soldiers yelled commands, returning fire. The entire neighborhood was awake now, lights flickering on, people screaming in fear.
And then, through the smoke and chaos, a silhouette appeared in the doorway. Tall, broad, his face partially bandaged, one eye burning with venomous fire.
Rahman.
His voice boomed, louder than the storm.
Hamza. Hamza's breath caught in his throat. His enemy stood before him.
Rahman's lips curled into a twisted smile.
Main keh rahadana? Main latunga. Or is bar, main tum or tumhari behen ko apni samni jurjita bananga. He raised his pistol, pointing it directly at Hamza's chest.
Imran shoved Hamza and Aisha behind him, aiming his weapon.
Pichi hat, Rahman. Aaj tu bacha nahi payega.
The room crackled with tension, rain hammering against the shattered windows, gunfire rattling outside. Hamza's heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst. He gripped the logbook tighter, his mind racing. This was it. The showdown his father's blood had demanded. And as Rahman's finger tightened on the trigger, Hamza realized, this time, running wasn't an option.
Rahman's finger tightened on the trigger. The cold black muzzle of his pistol was aimed squarely at Hamza's chest. Time slowed.
The rain outside roared, the gunfire crackled like thunder. Aisha clutched Hamza's arm in terror, and Colonel Imran stood like a shield in front of them, his own weapon raised. Pichi Irena, Beta, Imran barked, his voice steady even as his eyes never left Rahman.
But Hamza's legs moved on their own.
He stepped forward, clutching the logbook to his chest. His voice rang out, sharp and fearless.
Rahman. The man's one good eye narrowed. Kia hua, chot sapahi? Dar gay? Hamza's chest heaved, but he didn't falter. Nahi. Aaj dar nahi. Aaj surf sach. He raised the logbook high. Yamir abu kakun high iss par. Or ya unka sach high. Chahi tum muyi marbi du, ya sech tumari maupanega.
The crowd outside the house, soldiers, neighbors, even reporters who had rushed in after hearing gunfire, fell into a stunned silence.
Cameras whirred despite the rain.
Every eye was fixed on the boy facing the man who had terrorized them all.
Rahman's teeth clenched, fury twisting his face. Maintum abi kadam kar dunga.
He jerked the pistol toward Hamza.
Bang! The shot rang out, deafening. Aisha screamed. Hamza flinched, stumbling back.
But when he looked down, he realized he was still alive. It was Rahman who staggered, clutching his shoulder.
Colonel Imran's pistol smoked, his stance unflinching. Aaj teri kadam hon ki rat hai, Rahman. Rahman roared like a wounded beast, firing blindly as soldiers stormed in through the shattered windows and broken door. Bullets ripped through the walls, sparks flying. Chaos erupted.
People screamed, ducking behind furniture. Hamza grabbed Aisha's hand, pulling her to cover behind an overturned table. His heart hammered, but his mind was sharp now. He watched Rahman bleeding, yet still raging, his pistol swinging wildly, soldiers ducking and returning fire. Then Hamza saw it, Rahman was too focused on the soldiers. His back was partially exposed. Hamza's father's voice echoed in his mind, Kabi Kabi, Beta, Jim Kaliya Bayasek Palki Himacheti.
Hamza's trembling hands tightened into fists. He whispered to Aisha, Mudi Maka Dekna Haga.
She grabbed his arm in panic.
Nahi, Biya. Mat Jao.
But Hamza met her eyes, tears glistening.
Agar Aaj main Pite Hatgaya, Toabu Kanam Fur Dolmain Miljaega. Muyi Ya Karna Haga.
Before she could stop him, he bolted from cover. His small feet splashed through rainwater pooling inside the broken house. The world blurred, the bullets, the screams, the flashing lights. All he saw was Rahman.
Rahman. Hamza's voice cut through the madness.
The man whirled, eyes blazing, pistol raising again.
But Hamza was faster.
With all his strength, he swung the heavy logbook straight into Rahman's face.
Thud!
The impact sent Rahman stumbling, his pistol clattering to the floor. The soldiers seized the chance, tackling him to the ground. He thrashed, roaring, but they pinned his arms, twisted his wrists, and cuffed him as he spat curses. Hamza stood panting, soaked in rain and sweat, staring at the man who had haunted his family. Rahman glared up at him, his face contorted in fury.
Tum, ek bakche ini moody, hara dia? Hamza's voice trembled, but it was strong. Nahi. Tu mabu ini haraya. Tum unka sach haraya. Main surf unki yawaz bankar aya.
The words silenced the room. Soldiers stared at the boy in awe. Reporters captured every second. Aisha rushed to Hamza, throwing her arms around him, sobbing with relief.
Rahman, broken and bleeding, was dragged out into the rain, his shouts fading into the night.
Inside the wrecked house, Hamza fell to his knees, clutching the logbook tightly. He lifted his tear-streaked face toward the heavens.
Abu, Humjeet Li. Days later, a national ceremony was held.
The president himself spoke as Khalid's name was restored with honor. His photo, in uniform, stood tall on the stage, garlanded with flowers. Soldiers saluted.
Crowds wept.
And at the front, a small boy stood proudly, his sister beside him, holding the logbook that had changed everything.
The president's voice echoed, Khalid ini apni mulk kuliye jandi. Orang beta, Hamza ini humi inyad dalaya kusach kavi chup nahi sakta. Ya mulkan dano ka shakriya ada karda hai.
The crowd thundered with applause.
Hamza's heart swelled with pride and pain. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, Abu, Aap Amar ho gay.
Aisha squeezed his hand, her smile through tears giving him strength. That night, as Hamza lay under the stars, the logbook beside him, he finally felt peace. His father was gone, but his spirit lived on in him, in his sister, in every heart that now remembered Khalid as a hero. He had been mocked as a liar, a child spinning tales. But in the end, truth had spoken louder than all lies. Hamza closed his eyes, whispering softly, Suno sab, sacha se barha or kuch nahi.
Chahi tum kitna bi chupeo, ek din wo kamakta hai. Abu, main aap se wada nibhaya.
The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as though saluting the boy who had carried his father's honor to victory.
Moral lesson. Sakai mushkil hodi hai, kabi jan laleti hai, like an ant main wahi gti hai. Jit kitna bi barhaho, ek kota bakjabi agar sach par kata hoje, towo sabspade dushman ko harasakta hai. Hamza ka safarya sabad karta hai, kayamat or iman se barha koi hathiyar nahi.
The story ends here, with Khalid immortalized as a hero, Hamza standing as his father's true legacy, and the nation reminded, truth, no matter how small its voice, can never be silenced.